Welcome, everyone, to the third annual Game and Went podcast. My name is Craig Kober. I'm joined by my very good fellow, Casey Kozlowski. Casey, 2022 has Game and Went. How'd you feel about the year?
It sure has. A lot of mixed feelings about this year, and I can't wait to get into it. Lots of great games, lots of big blunders.
Yeah, I honestly feel that this was a pretty packed year until we put it on the spreadsheet, and then I looked back and I was like, you know what, maybe not as stacked as originally thought. I feel like this was the year that you and I both experienced a lot of good games from prior years that took up a lot of our time. What do you think?
For sure. I think my greatest experiences this year were past Game of the Year contenders. They won't make this competition, but they're definitely worth discussing. Also, there's an elephant in the room that maybe we should address before we get into this.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Elden Ring is Game of the Year.
Yeah, let's just get that out of the way, I think, out front. Elden Ring is... it's so fucking good. It's the Game of the Year for both of us. So I guess kind of a spoiler that we'll be, putting that one on top. The more interesting conversation is probably going to come in, like, what's the next best game or the next couple best games. We've introduced a new category for us this year, the best indie game, just to sort of separate the GOTY with the indie GOTY. And then I also want to discuss, what's the best game from a different year that we've played this year. So we'll definitely talk a lot about some highlights that occurred for us this year.
Yeah, but Elden Ring is the Game of the Year. So know that it wins. It wins, dude. You did it. Congratulations, From Software. You're incredible.
Great job, From Software. Elden Ring slaps ass. Let's talk about Elden Ring a little bit here in a more official sense. I'm gonna make a bold take here, Casey. You ready for a bold take right out the gate?
Yeah.
I think Elden Ring is the best video game that's ever been made.
Okay, yeah, that's bold.
So here's my thinking. So I spent a lot of time asking myself, what makes a good video game, like, objectively. And I was like, when you look at a game like God of War 2018 or Ragnarok that came out this year, like The Last of Us, I genuinely think those are really great games because they use the medium of playing a game to enhance how you feel and to really drive emotion in a way that, other media doesn't have. And Elden Ring doesn't necessarily do that. It just feels like a video game-ass game. Like, you die and you respawn. You choose your character build. You get to, go in different directions and pick your path as to how you navigate this world. It's like a super video game-ass video game, but fuck if it isn't so well thought out. Everything is so deliberate. The world is so interesting to spend your time in. It was just such a joy. When was the last time you can say honestly that you were captivated by like an 130-hour long single-player experience?
Yeah, it's been a long time. Persona 5 would probably be the last time that's happened to me. And that's only because I made it a 130-hour game. Elden Ring is largely one of the best video games ever made. I can totally concede that point. But there's things it lacks, right? The story is, as FromSoft games usually are, intentionally obtuse. Not really all that intriguing. Now, the world's incredible, don't get me wrong. But those are different things to me. Breath of the Wild has the opposite problem, where the world is also barren, and the story's a little more engaging than your usual Zelda game. Elden Ring, it kind of is in the middle of those problems. The world is awesome to explore, but the lore is hard to get into unless you're really seeking it out. Also, can we talk about the naming scheme? We got Michael, Marcus, Marvin, Maxwell, Max the Second, Maxwell again with an asterisk at the end. The naming scheme was tough to keep up with the characters, the plot. I gotta admit, a lot of that I just kind of clicked through dialogue. It's like, I don't know who the fuck you're talking about. I don't know who I'm supposed to go see. I'm just here to fight giant demons. And that, it does very fucking well. Very fucking well.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Gameplay is always my main concern for pretty much 90% of the games I play until you run into a God of War Ragnarok, which I know we'll discuss down the road. I think it's impossible to discuss Elden Ring without the allusion to Breath of the Wild. And I think that why I feel so strongly about Elden Ring is I feel like it really took every lesson that Breath of the Wild did and just expanded on it. You have this beautiful, dense open world with really light content on the surface. You know, you've got some small dungeons, you've got some small things you can go into, you know, there's some unique challenges to find on the overworld, but then you also introduce those full levels, those legacy dungeons, those full FromSoft experiences that I think Zelda Breath of the Wild was really lacking. I think we needed dungeons to make that game like an absolute, 11 out of 10. And while I enjoyed exploring that world and the way that you navigate that with the verticality of it, I didn't lack that in Elden Ring because Elden Ring also added a feature that was, in my opinion, sorely missing from the previous Dark Souls / Bloodborne, I guess / Sekiro because I didn't play Sekiro, but the ability to jump in Elden Ring changed the way I approached combat in such a significant way it's impossible not to talk about.
Yeah, Sekiro had jumping, but it was a little more... I mean, that game was more acrobatic as a whole. This was a better balance of Dark Souls 3 with, like, some of that Breath of the Wild freedom. I think this game, I agree, this game does owe quite a bit to Breath of the Wild. But it brings so much of its own identity to the table. You can't credit Breath of the Wild, certainly fucking not, with any of the combat decisions or anything like that. The exploration, sure, but... like you said, it has its own identity, and a lot of that identity is having these Dark Souls set pieces in an open world. I'll never forget going to the, I forget what it's called, where you find Ronnie eventually, the place with the hands, the place with the creepy fucking hands.
Oh, yeah, the manor.
Yeah, that was awesome. That felt like a Dark Souls 3 level. That one sticks out to me so much, because it's like a contained game space in and of itself, that once you go in there... it feels like a traditional Dark Souls game. I felt the same way about the place where you end up getting, like, the grafted greatsword. These kind of segmented areas, these little bubbles almost, are all over the place. In that way, it has a little bit in common with Destiny, which has the bubble design of having these big things that are punctuated by open space that you can explore. I digress. Yeah, I mean, what can I really say that hasn't already been said about this game? It's incredible. I think it's going to define its own genre in a way that I look forward to seeing explored. You know what I mean? Dark Souls clones have always been a thing. I'm interested to see how they clone it now that Elden Ring is a thing. What are the Elden Ring clones going to be like? What's that open world phenomenon going to be like if they really have to nail it?
I think we'll see Elden Ring's influence on a lot of games in just enforcing more of the open world hype or trend that Breath of the Wild kicked off. As far as like what Elden Ring innovated from an open world game design, I genuinely think that the biggest thing they did to differentiate from Breath of the Wild was just adding those large form dungeons that Breath of the Wild missed in having those shrines be the smaller version of.
Yes, I think Elden Ring is like a perfected Breath of the Wild. While I liked Breath of the Wild so much, Elden Ring took what it did and perfected it, and now the shoe's on the other foot again, and I want Breath of the Wild 2 to take a lot from Elden Ring's book now. I want it to be, to use a Zelda analogy, like the battle between Phantom Ganon and Link, just shooting the ball back and forth until you finally reach a state of perfection and I can ascend into godhood. That is what I aim for.
I think Breath of the Wild has its work cut out, or I'm sorry, Tears of the Kingdom has its work cut out for it.
Right, yeah, I guess we should start calling it by its name.
Yeah, the fact that we haven't been, I think, speaks to how powerful Elden Ring is, because like it's captivated so much attention that it is effectively Breath of the Wild 2 as far as I'm concerned. But I think Tears of the Kingdom is going to have to figure out how to really excel in a post-Elden Ring environment. I think that we've seen a little bit of sequelitis from God of War Ragnarok.
Yep.
That Breath of the Wild 2 is going to have to consider. Sorry, Tears of the Kingdom is going to have to consider. How do you capture that magic in a bottle twice? And I'm eager to find out.
Yeah, we will see if they can pull it off. But I guess that's a wrap on Elden Ring, folks. So it's the game of the year. We both loved it. I have a few qualms with it. I have qualms with every game, but it was the best video game that I played this year, without a doubt. It's an experience I cannot relive, and so go play it if you haven't already. I find it hard to believe you'd be listening to this, but go play it.
Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, fact is you've probably listened to other podcasts about video games and you're already aware of everything about Elden Ring. So let's not harp on it any further. What I wanted to get into before we discuss the games that we played, can we just run through the list of all the games that came out this year that we didn't play and just kind of discuss why or why not, and I guess whatever we've heard about them that has, turned us on or off about them. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. So our major titles we didn't tackle this year, we would kick that off with Sifu, which came out in February. And Sifu was an interesting game. Not a game I'm generally into, but people really had kind of a hit or miss attitude about it. I heard that it was fun, but sometimes punishingly strict about its own rule set, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm always ear to the ground on action games, especially character action games. My love for Devil May Cry and Bayonetta and such. Whenever you introduce a new game that's really focused on the combat in a three-dimensional space, I think the lack of pedigree in a game like Sifu means that it's going to be harder for anybody to get into it. It could have a really great combat system, but I know that Devil May Cry 5 is going to be way more polished than Sifu is, and so it's going to be harder for me to pick that game up and find enjoyment in it because why would I not just be playing Devil May Cry 5?
Yeah, ultimately it didn't look like my kind of game. Nothing against it. Again, I've heard good things, but didn't really seem like my tempo, so I skipped that one.
It feels like one of the games that could end up being on PlayStation Plus free games sometime this year or next year. I may play it then, but I'm not terribly in any hurry to play it in the future.
Same. I would say that's one that would have to come to Game Pass or be free at some point for me to even give it a look. There's so many other games that appeal to me more, and it's nothing against that genre, but I am not a fan of that kind of game.
In the spirit of games that I'm not terribly a fan of, Horizon Forbidden West came out in February as well. This poor series, these poor developers. I mean, the first game came out, a week before Breath of the Wild? This one came out a week before Elden Ring. How much does it have to suck to create this, honestly, full, interesting-looking open world just to have it completely overshadowed by a tremendous industry-changing dominant force? Twice in a row.
Yeah, it's a single-player game that has been cursed to release alongside a even better single-player game and probably one of the more major multiplayer releases of the year, because Witch Queen also came out, the same week. So we had all these games coming out at the same time. I gotta be honest, I don't think I'm alone when I say Horizon was not a game that I have anything against, but it was at the bottom of that list. Yeah, hell yeah, give me Witch Queen, fun with my friends. Hell yeah, give me Elden Ring, fun by myself. And then there's Horizon. Why did you release in that same week?
And the fact that I didn't play the first one and really had no interest in playing the first one definitely didn't help it on this list.
I could be wrong. I think I would have the same problems that I had with the first game. I played the first game, and I think I discussed this in a previous wrap-up. But I played the first Horizon after playing Breath of the Wild. That was a bad idea, because Horizon still has the traditional open world limits. Horizon feels like you should be able to climb walls like you can in Breath of the Wild, and you can't, and it's the most deflating thing to experience. So I really bounced off of it after a few hours. Maybe they fixed that. I couldn't say, but I am in no hurry to play Horizon either. That's one that I'd pick up in the bargain bin.
Yeah, if I'm really dire for a game, I'll probably take a look at the first one, but I don't expect that to happen anytime in the future given the amount of games that I wanted to play and didn't get around to. For example, Tunic came out this year and got a lot of press for being a really interesting approach to a Zelda-like. The common, I guess, concept with this game is that you don't really know anything about it. There's no manual. They don't even tell you what button does what. And so as you go along and sort of meander through this game, you'll unlock more pieces of a manual that'll tell you how to navigate the world, what certain buttons do, ways that you can figure out secrets maybe that are available to you at the start. You just don't have the actual knowledge to perform. Kind of an interesting concept. I've heard it compared to Fez a few times.
Yeah. You actually described it once to me as Fez plus Zelda, which I think was the greatest comparison. Fez is that kind of obtuse game where you only kind of get what you put into it, and I will talk about a game that I really enjoyed that had that kind of playstyle later, but I didn't think Fez nailed it necessarily. I liked Fez a lot, but there were parts of it that were frustrating. And I played a little bit of Tunic, and I felt that same way. I was like, okay, well now I have Zelda, like an action game, plus that obtuse stuff. It's fine when it's Fez and it's just platforming and exploring and being in a cool mystery world. It's a little less fun when I have combat thrown into the mix and I'm like, I wish I knew how to fucking dodge or have this ability or that ability. That's a game for some people, and I think a lot of people really like that. When I played it, I wasn't really in the mood for that kind of experience, so I bounced off of it pretty quickly.
I don't know if it's out for Switch yet or if it will be, but if it comes on Switch and is up for sale, I'll for sure pick it up and just play it, while I'm watching TV or on a plane or something. Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin also came out this year. What a weird fucking game. I definitely want to play it. I played the demo and actually enjoyed the demo, but it suffers from following the Dark Souls type, following the Dark Souls, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like a Souls-like formula?
Pattern. Yeah, the formula. It follows the Dark Souls formula, but similarly to the issue I had with that game Nioh.
Yeah, I think it's Nioh. I don't know.
It was weird and like really snappy and a little too fast, and I just didn't really enjoy it, but I've seen high-level play of it, and man, it's fascinating, dude. The way the magic system works, the way the weapons, very cool.
Yeah, I was always interested in it. I think it's meme bait a lot of the time for its very interesting writing. Chaos. I need to find chaos. What are you doing, dude? Going to find chaos. As it beats you over the head with it. It almost feels like a parody of itself. From what I've seen. I would check
I appreciate that they leaned into that, though, honestly.
Yeah, I kind of like the cheese. I mean, it reminds me of like in Final Fantasy 15, or maybe it's 15. I think 15 is the one with Noctis.
Yeah.
When they have the cup noodles, and there's a cup noodles side quest. Like, okay, it's intentionally campy and cheesy. Or when they have Coleman coolers at their fucking campsite in the middle of a demon war. I think there's some charm to that. Final Fantasy knows how to do like goofy shit pretty well and have that shtick in the game without it feeling too like over the top. So I think I'd enjoy it. It's I would say out of all the ones we discussed so far, it's the highest on my list of like would play this. Just a matter of playing other shit when it came out and not a game I'm going to pay full price for, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking to pick it up on sale on PlayStation 5, which is exactly what I did for Ghostwire Tokyo. I actually bought that, I think, last week while I was still back in New York. This game came out to mixed reviews, and I only picked it up because it's a PS5 exclusive, which means it's probably going to look and run great on that console. But also, I just got a hankering for some open world first-person nonsense after playing so much Cyberpunk this year. I'll look forward to trying it out. I have no idea if it'll be good or not, but I think I paid like $20 for it, maybe.
Yeah, getting cheap games is always nice. Not one I would check out based on reviews I've seen that were a little bit damning of it, but I don't want that to sour your expectations for it. I'll be interested to see what you think and if you agree with the people I kind of follow and my own confirmation bias circle that I'm in. Not high on my list. I'll put it that way, to put it politely.
I'll keep you posted. Maybe we'll end up talking about it next year if it's worth talking about.
Indeed. We skipped over Triangle Strategy, actually.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to that. What'd you think?
This is an easy one, so I am not really into the retro type of like RPGs. This is a thing that will get me crucified in many circles, but like the more traditional Final Fantasy games, your Chrono Triggers, your Secrets of Mana, these are fine games. Never really been hugely my thing. Now, I'm not saying Triangle Strategy is like those games necessarily, but you can see what it's going for, right? The retro kind of throwback style that Octopath Traveler did before it.
Yeah, it's the next in the series, I think, from that same team of those like 2.5 HD. They have some particular term for the way that those games appear. But I'll tell you, buddy, I bought an analog pocket this year and tried to get into the genre that is tactics games that Triangle Strategy follows. Boy fucking howdy, do I hate those damn games, man.
So is it like a what's the name of that game? Is it like Advanced Wars and Fire Emblem and that kind of thing?
Yes. Yes. I think so, and if I'm wrong, boy howdy, am I wrong. But I played Fire Emblem on the GBA. Love that game because it's really as simple as it gets. I tried playing Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, which I thought was going to be simple. The game came out, 20 plus years ago maybe? And that game drove me fucking nuts, dude. I'm good on that one, and I'm good on, like, Tactics Ogre. There is a big fandom for games like this, and I am not in it.
I would agree. And that brings us to a game that is everyone's cup of tea, Nintendo Switch Sports.
Yeah, that is not everyone's cup of tea, because I don't think it sold very well. I thought this was an interesting enough release. It's Wii Sports, which everybody played the shit out of, but the Switch isn't really like the motion controller console that I think they wanted it to be when they released it.
Well, it's also just like the crowd that liked Wii Sports is not that same crowd anymore, right?
Yeah, they're all in retirement homes.
Yeah, and also, like, if you want Wii Sports, just play Wii Sports. I feel like the kind of person that would want another Wii Sports game kept their Wii and still plays Wii Sports.
Probably.
So here's my tagline for the game: Nintendo Switch Sports. It's Wii Sports again. It's Wii Sports again. Nintendo Switch Sports. Give us $60.
The $60 price tag killed this one for me.
Actually, you know what? I want to correct myself. I believe it's only $40. That might just be because it's on sale right now, but I don't want to confirm that it's $60. I do want to confirm that it's too much money. I think it should have come with like the new Switch OLED or something. I think it should have been a bundle into something, because that's what Wii Sports was, and that's why Wii Sports was so successful.
This, and what was the one that came out with the Switch? 1-2 Switch?
No, that didn't even come with the Switch. You had to pay $60.
Right, it came out with the Switch, though.
Oh, yeah, it came out alongside it, yeah.
Like, the fact that they charge so much for these games is part of my main issue with Nintendo these days, which is just their games cost too much. I think that even the first-party titles that are really well-developed cost too much. Like, you can't compare them to games on other consoles. First of all, they look terrible. They perform terribly, a lot of them. They don't ever go on sale. Like, I have no incentive to buy games that I otherwise wouldn't. Yeah, I'll buy a game on PlayStation if it's on sale and just be like, hey, that looks interesting. That, is what I feel like I would pay for a game like this. Nintendo never does that. And as a result, I'm never going to buy their weird, shitty games.
Yeah, well, that, and, you got Sony and Xbox throwing out fucking video games to you like they're candy. Epic Games Store, for Christ's sake, has more offerings than Nintendo paid subscribers that have like the deluxe membership. What do you get with that right now? You get like Mario Kart maps and like Animal Crossing DLC. Not nary a free game in sight. So I agree with you. Not to turn this into a fuck Nintendo podcast, but it's annoying to have so little value in a lot of these games. Look at the Super Mario collection that was like 64, Sunshine, Galaxy, no Galaxy 2, $60 for a limited time only, that you could only buy it during, and it might be 50. I'm sorry if I'm saying 60.
No, it was 60. I bought it.
Yeah, so yuck. They could make so much money if they just did things a little differently. Imagine having the Paper Mario games bundled together for $60. It would sell like hotcakes. I'd buy that in a heartbeat. But Nintendo makes baffling decisions. It's been this way for decades. They make incredible games, and they have the worst business operation in the industry when it comes to treating their customers with like respect. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Honestly, I feel like I guess this year now, we're recording this 2023. I feel like this year is going to be the make or break for Nintendo in this generation. If we don't see an upgraded Switch model Tears of the Kingdom is really the only thing that I think is going to sell on the Switch in my mind. The gap between Nintendo and Sony and Xbox right now is huge. And they haven't done much to really bridge that gap in the past 2 years. It's just becoming more and more noticeable, and now that the Steam Deck exists, I think Nintendo really has a fire under them that they need to figure out.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? We can visit the Steam Deck a bit more in detail after we get through more of these games, because I do want to talk about that and how much it is probably going to shake things up.
Well, let's touch on real quick while we're talking about Nintendo. One of the next games we have on the list is Mario Strikers Battle League. You and I discussed this the other day. The problem with this game is that there's no progression, and it's $60. It's $60 for an arcade-style game that I don't think has a lot of staying power. I just thought that was a baffling choice. At least put like a minimal story mode in there to give people some incentive to play on their own.
Yeah, it's another instance of giving gamers something that you know they think they want, and then finding out, oh, this is a bare bones husk of what I used to enjoy as a kid. That's what happened with Mario Tennis. I didn't play Mario Golf. Maybe that was a little better. But it's what happened with Mario Party. Mario Party is a travesty. Mario Party is the perfect game for like a seasonal model or just having DLC ever. It got none of that, and it certainly didn't get free updates. It's a travesty.
If they gave Mario Party Superstars the same treatment that they're giving Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, where they're going back and they're just adding in updated courses from previous games, just do that. Just add in like an occasional, board and some occasional packs of mini games. Because Mario Party Superstars has been a blast to play. It just feels like it's really light on content.
Yeah. It goes right back to what we were talking about. They're great at their flagship titles. Their Zelda games fucking own. Their Mario games, incredible. Whenever we get another mainline Mario Kart, I'm sure it'll be great. Smash Bros, dope. But anytime they have anything else, it's like it's just phoned in, right? We'll talk a lot about the Pokemon games when we get to those, but that's a big example of it. Oh, boy. And it's like they could have slam dunk after slam dunk if they just put effort into having some value behind these games, these classics that recapture people's nostalgia. And they're whiffing it constantly. Nobody has an easier path to success than Nintendo, and they find a way to make it difficult time and time again. I digress.
Yeah. I agree with you. I feel like Nintendo has finally gotten to the point where I'm no longer willing to stake my $60 on assuming they're going to make a game that I want to play. Like 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, I would pick up any Nintendo title that had a name in it that I know and trust. Mario, Zelda, even Metroid Dread last year was fantastic. But more often than not, these games just make me disappointed, especially when I see them how they're performing on that old hardware.
Yeah.
It's just harder and harder to justify. Let's just kind of run through the rest of the Nintendo games.
Yeah, I was going to say, while we're on Nintendo, we have Splatoon 3, which came out this year as well, and we have Mario and Rabbids 2, Sparks of Hope, to talk about.
And Xenoblade Chronicles 3. All 3 games neither of us played.
Yeah, you're right. So these, honestly, all 3 of those I would say are more appealing than the previous 3 we've discussed. I enjoyed the first 2 Splatoon games. 1 was pretty bare bones. 2 introduced a really robust campaign that I liked. I didn't get a ton of replayability out of the multiplayer because I'm not really a huge Call of Duty, Destiny PvP guy. I like PvE content. So, but even with just that, even with just PvE, and they had a co-op mode as well called Salmon Run, I thought I got my money's worth from Splatoon 2. But like you just said, why didn't I get Splatoon 3? It's getting harder and harder to justify these price tags. And to be fair, it's not just Nintendo. It's all across the industry. People are churning out half-baked stuff every year. This is known, and we don't need to harp on it. But we're just focusing on Nintendo right now. if this was 2 years ago, I would have bought Splatoon 3 in a heartbeat. But I've played, 3 half-baked Pokemon games since then, and have gotten, no news on DLC for any of the games I paid full price for. So why would I buy Splatoon 3 when support might be dead in 2 months?
I just find it hard to invest any money into a game that runs on Nintendo's online system. Even if Splatoon 3 ran perfectly, just the way that they handle their online is so archaic. I just don't want to try it.
It is. I will say, though, as far as online goes, Splatoon is the smoothest experience you can have on the Switch in terms of online play. I don't know what demon magic they got for that, or what they implemented in those squids to make them actually not laggy as fuck, but it's solid. But yeah, skip that one. And you know what? I don't know if I'll ever play it, because I know that Splatoon 3 won't get a price cut ever.
Yeah, it'll never go on sale. It'll never get a price cut.
Or you know what? Maybe it'll get a 10% off when they shut the servers down.
That's possible.
Brought to you by Nintendo.
Mario and Rabbids. I'm sorry, Mario and Rabbids. Yeah, my bad. Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope. I didn't play the first one. I don't think I've ever played an XCOM game, so it just didn't stand out to me. And Xenoblade Chronicles suffers the same challenge. I've never played those games. I think that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was way too horny, and I think that soured the taste in my mind. But Xenoblade is one of those JRPGs that I have friends who play it and they're like, oh, it's really great and really deep, and you'll be really surprised by how deep and rich the characters are. But then I look at the character designs and I'm like, I don't want to play this game with Playmobil characters. I'm good, y'all.
There's a lot of barriers to entry for Xenoblade. I hear the same things. I hear that the stories are incredible, but then I'll ask people, hey, what one should I start with? And then someone's like, oh, well, none of them are actually connected, and none of them even have the same gameplay style. If you want to have the smoothest gameplay style but the shittiest experience, play this one. If you want to have the best experience but really dog shit gameplay, play this. But it also has bad stories, so keep that in mind. I'm like, whoa! These are not traditional sequels. They're completely... It's kind of like Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 15 versus 16, yeah. But that's not my thing. These games are massive, from what I've been told. These are not small undertakings. These are beefy, lengthy JRPGs, and like you said, they're a bit horny. It's a kind of it's a little bit of weeb bait, if I'm being honest. That's all cool and dandy. I'm not trying to get into that unless it's a series that I have vetted, like Persona. I'll buy Persona 6 whenever that comes out because I loved 5. I'm not going to take a gamble on the third entry in a series. Maybe Xenoblade 1 I'd pick up, but I'm not going to pick up 3.
Yeah, there's an audience for that game, and it's not me.
Yep, that is the story of 2022, I think we'll find.
Yeah, and I think we've spent enough time talking about the games we didn't play, so let's just rattle off the last few. Immortality, people have been singing praise of, but it's an FMV game. It's not very gameplay heavy. Dragon Ball The Breakers, which is Dead by Daylight with Dragon Ball characters, not for me.
I just don't trust anime games to be good. With Immortality, I'll probably check it out eventually. I liked that dev, but yeah, it's an FMV game. There's not a huge market for that. Stray, we skipped over Stray, and for good reason, I think. Stray is a game about a cute cat, and that's really kinda it. If you like being a cute cat, that's the game for you. That's it. That's Stray.
The thing that kept me from playing Stray is that the common criticisms of it are that the game gets hijacked by a really basic, uninteresting plot line where there's a robot character you have to listen to, and you stop getting to be a cat and having to start be a super cat that's doing things that no cat would ever do.
Yeah, it's
and I just don't want to play that game.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I have a cat. I have plenty of cat in my life. You have a cat. We have cats, dude. It's
yeah.
There's a market for that game, and it's not me. That's gonna be the quote of the year.
That's gonna be on the Game and Went T-shirt.
That should be the sub. That should be the subtitle for this episode of the podcast. Game of the Year 2022 subtext. There's a demographic for that, and I'm not in it.
And you know what? Good on this year then, because I'm sure there's a lot of fans of these niche franchises who are really stoked about some of these games. I'll fall into a couple of them as we'll get into, but
yeah, talking about
not
niche,
those ones.
Niche games that only a certain amount of people will fall into. Scorn, which is, speaking of horny games, a very horny tribute to Geiger's work.
I wouldn't describe it as horny at all, but it's a very faithful interpretation of Geiger's art as a gameplay mechanic, which is probably not good.
You're right. It's much more accurate to call it phallic and just biological, unabashedly focused on biological, like, sexuality. It's not horny. There's nothing horny about the game. But you will see giant dicks and titties on every wall. So
it's pretty fucking weird, if I may.
Yeah, if that's your thing, you know what I'm going to say already. There's a demographic, and I'm not in it. So moving on to Gotham
Knights, which is Avengers, but somehow worse.
Yeah, this one, we'll revisit this, because this is a blunder contender. So we'll come back to that one.
Yeah, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. It's a Call of Duty game. It's a remake, or I don't know, they used the same name twice. Who fucking cares?
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the second edition of it, but not to be confused. No, sorry, this is Modern Warfare 2, the new Modern Warfare 2, not to be confused with the remaster of Modern Warfare 2, which came out just a few years ago.
Christ.
And that's not to be confused with Modern Warfare 2, the original game. This is a new Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, despite having exactly the same name and no distinguishing title. So if you want a brand new game called Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and this is not a bit, go play it. But you already have played Call of Duty if you like Call of Duty, and if you don't, you won't. It's not something we need to get into.
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, subtitle, we're out of ideas.
Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, parentheses, again, end parentheses, question mark at the end?
You may not buy our game.
Yeah. Get the Evangelion titling going on. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, 3.1, 7 more finals. Sonic Frontiers.
Sonic Frontiers. I'm interested in this game. My buddy No Game Over is up in Canada, streamed all the Sonic games that have ever been made, I think, in the mainline series.
Holy shit.
On his Twitch channel, and I watched most of that. That's kind of what kept me going through the pandemic. So I explicitly didn't buy this game because Bayonetta 3 had just come out, God of War Ragnarok was coming out the next day, and I knew I'd watch him play it, but I'm interested in it, even with all the criticism surrounding it.
I have heard it's a very unique and the best, in some ways, Sonic they've made yet. As a person
That's not saying much, unfortunately.
It isn't, but as a person who, unironically, had Pokemon Scarlet and Violet on his Game of the Year shortlist, I can relate to games that are horrendously flawed, but still very, very good in certain ways. So we'll unpack that a bit. Sonic is a game that I'm not going to pick up for more than, like, honestly, if that shit hits Game Pass, I'm there. If not, yeah, I'm cool. I'll watch a video. Soundtrack, though, absolute bangers from what I've heard.
Yeah. Sonic games always have absolutely dynamite soundtracks, and I'll honestly listen to them without playing the game just because I think they slap so hard.
Same. I remember that one when you're going down the hill in Adventure 2 or Adventure 1 that everyone loves, the iconic
Oh, yeah,
song.
Escape from the City and Sonic Adventure 2.
I listen to that shit all the time.
Iconic.
It's just a nice song, man.
It is. I used to listen to that soundtrack, like, on Spotify, no cap.
Yeah, the only other series that I can really say that about is, like, Silent Hill. I think they have some really surprisingly, like, dope ambient tracks.
The Callisto Protocol is Dead Space, but bad.
Yeah.
And also apparently very buggy.
Coming off the heels of that horror game reference, Callisto Protocol, which was... you know what? This is another game that I think we'll revisit because I think this is on the Blender of the Year shortlist. This is a game that really had a lot of people fired up, and that's the disappointing part, right? That's always the heartbreaker. It was kind of a cyberpunk again, but on a much more minute scale. We'll talk about Callisto, but bad Dead Space is the vibe I got.
Yeah, bad Dead Space. And Marvel's Midnight Suns, I've actually heard a lot of praise for. It's like an XCOM, but there's also Persona life sim stuff that I think people are mixed on. I don't really have much to say about it. Do you?
Not really, only that I have heard that the Persona shit is very bad and that the gameplay is very good. So make of that what you will, but, I'm not interested in going through 50% of my game being unenjoyable. So that's not for me.
Yeah, pretty lukewarm reception then. And then the last game that came out this year that neither of us played was Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. When they marketed this, I thought it was going to be a remake type game, sort of like the one with Yuffie, the Intergrade. But I guess it's more of just a rehash on the appearance. It really keeps everything pretty faithful to the original Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core.
Yeah, this one, I'll be honest, and I've told you this before, the Final Fantasy remake right now is something that's on my back burner. I'm going to play that whole thing when it's all released, just because I don't find the gameplay super compelling. I really like the story, so I don't want to wait 3 years between installments, so I'm kind of waiting till the end. Crisis Core gets lumped in with that, just because it is part of that saga. So this one for me is a not even on my radar yet, until, who knows, right? The maybe 5 fucking years we have to wait until this trilogy gets wrapped up.
Hey, fair enough, man. I'll play it at some point if I find a gap in my games calendar. I don't expect that to happen anytime soon, but I'm not against it. I'll check it out. I'm interested in knowing what the fuck is going on with the Zack guy.
Do we want to take a little break before we get into the meat of this, the games we have played?
Hey, let's take a break, buddy. Let's take a break, and then we'll get into some good meat. How would that sound? And we are back with Game & Went. We're going to talk about some of the hottest titles of 2022. Casey, do you want to go about this chronologically, or do you want to just start rattling them off in no particular order? What do you think?
I think let's start with games that we might have been. Let's save our heavy hitters.
I'm so sorry to interrupt this message, Casey, but it is urgent. We have a incoming correspondence from Chief Destiny 2 correspondent Casey Kozlowski. Casey, what's happening this year in Destiny 2?
Oh, all right. I guess this guy's a... Hello, Craig. I am here outside Bungie headquarters in Bellevue, Washington. We are so excited about the past year we have had in Destiny. The Witch Queen was the best expansion to date in terms of story content, and the seasons that followed were... back to the Witch Queen, which was very fun. The Legendary campaign was reminiscent of Halo Legendary mode, right? It's what everyone grew up with if you played shooters. It really brought that feeling back, and it had a story to go with it. Destiny hasn't seen something like that. It tried. It's had heroic story playlists in Destiny 1, but the story was horseshit. It's had really good story in Destiny 2, but the difficulty's been piss easy. They finally solved it and didn't have to include champions. That might not make a lot of sense to someone who doesn't play Destiny, but believe me, it's a good thing. The Witch Queen is the best expansion yet, and while the seasons that followed really were a mixed bag, this last season that we're in right now, leading up to Lightfall, is bananas, and I'm quite excited for the next year of content. It is safe to say, and you're hearing it here first, folks, Destiny 2 is still not a dead game, despite what you may have heard.
I think that, and this was the year that I kind of got back into Destiny. I feel like I've been really going every other year for the most part, but I went hard when The Witch Queen came out. The campaign was honestly fantastic. I think everything you said about the story and the Legendary campaigns was very accurate. It really did feel like playing Halo, especially with the amount of cover that I had to take. I went really hard in all of the seasons except for the last one, the season of, what was it, Plunder?
Yeah, Plunder, which was a filler season, and that was the worst offering on show this year. But they can't all be winners. I get that.
I think the first season was fine with the PsyOps Battlegrounds. I mean, it had you had all that heat coming off of the expansion just coming out.
Right.
I really enjoyed Season of the Haunted with the Castellum and the Scythe, and those missions were sick, dude. It made me feel incredibly powerful. And I'll tell you, when I got off the plane, all I wanted to do was play Destiny. I did have to take a nap and recover, but I played Destiny pretty much all day yesterday, trying to make up for lost time during the dawning. I wasn't able to finish my card, but I gave it a good shot. I know, I was so disappointed.
Yeah, it's the seasons that come alongside the expansions are always tough, right? Because you kind of just bunch it in with the expansion in your head. It just feels like one singular package. Haunted was good, but Haunted had the worst grind of the year.
Big time.
You really had to grind. It was arduous. I just now finished getting all the guns from that season.
Oh, wow.
Plunder was a bit of a joke. But yeah, like I said, this one right now, the season of I don't know the name
Seraph?
of it. Yeah, Season of the Seraph. I wanted to say Season of Rasputin because that's an equally accurate
Might as well
name.
be.
It's really gearing us up for things in a great way, and the stakes are here, and that's the thing I want to focus on. Destiny has always been memed on for its story. It's been dunked on for it relentlessly, and they've had a lot of ups and downs, but over the last few years they've really ramped it up, and we're now in a stage where it feels like the Destiny equivalent of, and I use this comparison with you all the time, Avengers. The Avengers movies, the Avengers Infinity War saga, where you had Infinity War, which was this big, grand epic that was basically a direct lead-in to an even bigger, grander epicer. And that's the vibe I'm getting from Lightfall, which is going to be followed by the final shape, which, I mean, come on. It's got final in the fucking title. So if you're at all into Destiny, or you fell off Destiny, Lightfall looks like it's going to be the perfect time to get back into it. And that's the end of my Destiny shill segment.
I'm super here for Destiny. I'm really enjoying playing it. I thought that all of the I haven't done the Spire of the Watcher, the most recent dungeon, but Duality was a ton of fun. I loved Vow of the Disciple. I enjoyed revisiting King's Fall. I just think they're doing a great job on content. For the most part, I mean, no company's going to, post up 1,000 every time, but I've really been enjoying just playing Destiny again for the first time in years. And I'm glad it's back, and I'm really excited to see what they're able to do next year.
Well, yeah, but next week as well. I mean, that really captures kind of what they've nailed so well, is that Destiny is a game that keeps you coming back, keeps you playing it. It's not always great. It's not always in a great place, but I have not stopped playing the game for any significant amount of time for fucking 7 years now. I cannot say that about any other video game in my life. So bravo to
Destiny
Bungie.
2 is very good.
Destiny 2 is my game of the year. No, I'm kidding, but definitely check it out again if you haven't, or you have and you just took a break. I really think Lightfall is the beginning of an epic conclusion that people have been asking for years. So check it out. Love that fucking game.
You're going to have to help me with that exotic mission. Maybe when we're done with this, we'll have to see.
Oh, yeah. I got Dremel on deck, man. We'll run it.
Good stuff. So, yeah, now that we're no longer interrupted by Destiny, end of segment.
Man, that was weird. Who was that guy? He seems really charismatic and passionate about Destiny.
Very cool. Loves Destiny, that guy. Tell me about your feelings with the Pokemon games this year. Let's just tackle them both at once. You had one come out in January. You had one come out in November. And I think they were pretty different. Lay it down on me.
Yeah, there was a lot different, and there was a lot that was the same. I really enjoyed both games. I was really appalled by how badly both games ran from a technical standpoint. They both suffered the exact same fates. And if you thought having that year between them would do fuck all for the performance of them, you are sorely mistaken, unfortunately. These are both games that have so much potential from a technical and graphical standpoint, and they squander it. They bomb the landing. They don't even hit the runway, man. They overshoot it by miles. And yet, Pokemon Legends Arceus and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are two of the most fun Pokemon games I've ever played. And for my 2 cents, I think they're the best Pokemon games to come out since my personal favorites in the series, Gold and Silver. That's a big statement, but they did creativity and new ideas and experimentation that I don't think has been done seriously since the Game Boy games.
I think that's incredibly high praise. So high, in fact, I'll mention that I didn't play either of them, but I did start a new game in Pokemon Crystal on my Analog Pocket. So I have been playing a Pokemon game this year. It just came out in like 2000 or whenever that came out.
Well, you have a great lifeline then to, I think, what Scarlet and Violet do really well. I'm going to talk primarily about those. Pokemon Legends Arceus felt like a PTR version of Pokemon, right? An experimental game that's not necessarily what you'd consider, well, it's not mainline by any means, but, you know, in some ways I don't even consider it canon, even though it is. It's like a kind of like a history, a very past
I would argue
version.
the canon of Pokemon doesn't matter hardly at all.
Yeah, so when I say canon, I mean, like, yeah, I'm not going to count Pokemon Legends Arceus ever when I count, like, oh, what are my favorite Pokemon games? But I thought it was enjoyable. The reason I'm going to focus on Scarlet and Violet is because everything that is found in Arceus, for the most part, is refined and put into Scarlet and Violet where it can be. Obviously, you can't have a Pokemon game. Well, if you're Nintendo and Game Freak, you can't have a Pokemon game that is fully open world and has full Pokemon catching mechanics from Arceus, because I don't know. You gotta take that up with them. There's a problem going on there. There's something that they can't figure out, because you look at Mario Odyssey, which maybe is an unfair example because that is like their flagship game. But even look at Breath of the Wild, which runs at 30 FPS. And we've discussed this. It's gorgeous. It looks like a Hayao Miyazaki movie. It's incredible. It looks like a painting. Someone walks in, you're playing Breath of the Wild, they're going to stop and stare for a second. You're not going to be fucking staring at Scarlet and Violet for those reasons. You're going to be like, why is the game running at 12 FPS? Why did that Geodude just clip into the ground and look like fucking Missing No for a second? These are not pretty games to look at.
I think the magic of Mario Odyssey came in the level design and the art design working around the lack of graphical and performance fidelity. If you revisit Mario Odyssey, there are some long distance renders that are low res, but for the most part, the levels are all set up in a way that if you go too far away from an object, it'll just despawn in a really pleasant way. It'll have this little pattern on it as it despawns. With these Pokemon games, it's just like, it's like PS2 era graphics. Mm-hmm. You're so in touch with the polygons and those low res textures at a distance, or even up close. And the big thing is when you go too far, and some things like running at 1 frame per second. One of the podcasts I listened to referred that to PowerPoint mode.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty funny. After I played Sword and Shield, I had to tell myself, I have to show some restraint on the next few Pokemon games, because while I enjoyed a lot of Sword and Shield, it left me feeling so fucking empty that when Pokemon Legends Arceus came out, I watched some reviews, I watched some gameplay, I was really let down by what I saw, so let down that I knew for a fact I wouldn't be picking up Pokemon Scarlet or Violet, and I'm glad I didn't, because the general consensus is that the game just needed more time in the oven. And I think if Pokemon's going to continue to put out if Game Freak is going to continue to put out a new Pokemon game annually, I'm not going to be a customer. And that sucks, because this game sold so much that I know they will.
Fucking 2 annually by their current cadence. Because you had Arceus in January and you had Scarlet and Violet in November. Like, they're ramping it up. They're doing the opposite of what needs to happen.
Arceus was supposed to be released last year, to be fair, and was delayed till January.
Oof.
So they were planning on annual releases.
You'd be forgiven for not knowing that when you look at that game. Here's the thing, though. All of that roasting aside, what you said there is a perfect... Oh, by the way, here's a vocal impression of load-in or texture pop-in in a normal game. Ooh. It's quite nice. It's quite soothing, right? Here's Pokemon Scarlet and Violet when you see something pop in the environment. Ah! It's not great. It's unpleasant. It's downright hideous to look at. I get what you mean. But I digress on all that. what you said nailed a really good point when you said you felt empty after Sword and Shield. And I am proud to say Scarlet and Violet, despite all its shortcomings, did not make me feel that way. In fact, I felt delighted by the time the credits rolled. I was like, damn, that is a fucking good video game. Ignore all the ugly exterior shit about it. There truly is gold in them there hills. It didn't hurt that Toby Fox did the music for the final, like, end game portion of the game, and it was incredible and really added to the atmosphere. But the story, the characters, they're actually really fucking good this time. It almost feels like it's not even a Pokemon game you're playing at times. But it also makes the lack of voice acting more apparent than ever, and I think this is their final line in the sand. Zelda eventually reached that point where it was like, we just can't have text only anymore. And Breath of the Wild introduced some voice acting, but even then, not nearly enough, in my opinion. Pokemon is there. Pokemon, there are scenes that are painful to watch because the characters are emoting and speaking, and you have to just fucking read dialogue. It's crazy. It's like you're watching a silent film at this point. So they need to fix that. But I really loved this game.
You're not alone. There's been a lot of as equal as there's been bad press, there's been people saying the same. Despite its flaws, they still love it. And it is the top-selling Pokemon game of all time, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
Maybe
it
just
sure
the
is.
fastest selling. So obviously people like this game. I think what it would take for me to buy it is to get some sort of performance boost in, I don't know if it's a new gen Switch that comes out or if they just patch it. And I might pick it up used because that shit's never going on sale.
Yep.
So
I want nothing more than to see like a very powerful Nintendo console coming up next. I'm sure that won't happen. But if it did, I would love to revisit this game on it. And then I could recommend it even more. And the only reason I'm spending so long harping on it is because this game really was almost in my Game of the Year list. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite make the cut just because of how brutal the technical performance is and how much that takes away from the experience, because it is significant.
Yeah, and not for nothing, there were some games that played well on the Switch this year. I'll look at Monster Hunter Rise, which came out with the DLC Sunbreak, the expansion this year. That game runs insanely fucking well on the Switch. Like, it came out in the same year as, well, I guess it came out last year, so not this year technically, but it performs so well. It's smooth. If it's not 60 frames per second, you could have fooled me. But, like, how can a game like that come out and look so good and play so well and then have Pokemon Scarlet and Violet came out? Like, it's just, it kind of baffles me a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know what the cause of that is.
Well, even if we don't use Mario Odyssey as an example, because, again, I think that is a little unfair. They put fucking buku bucks into that. But look at Mario and Rabbids. I just bought the first game in this, so I can't speak to it too much yet. I'm still playing through that. But it looks great. It's a really good-looking game, and it's a Ubisoft title. It's a complete spin-off. This isn't like a game that Nintendo had control over the development process, aside from, like, overseeing it. Pokemon's the same exact situation, and it came out looking 10 times worse, and it's like, okay. I mean, Mario and Rabbids is no slouch. There's a lot of computing that goes into it. It's an XCOM game, right? And it looks really good, and it runs really well. I just would have liked fucking 30 FPS at the minimum for Scarlet and Violet, and it couldn't even hit that, and it's never been more damning. The Switch can't run games anymore, unless it's like a flagship title for Nintendo. Something's got to give, man. We're ready for the next generation for Nintendo.
I think so, too. I genuinely, I've been holding out on buying a Steam Deck because I'd rather buy an upgraded Switch. I want to have that console so I can continue to play Nintendo's games, but if they're not making games at a fidelity that makes me feel like my money is well spent, I'm not going to do it. And we've spoken about that to a great extent already. So let me just cover the other two games I played on the Switch this year, which was one, Neon White, which you didn't play at all, did you?
I did not play it. I have a great interest in it. I was very intrigued by the trailer. It's right up my alley, that very quirky, kind of quirked up, like fast-paced indie. And it has a little bit of that Hades feel to it, too, with the way that dialogue is presented. There's, like, beautiful artwork of the characters. I don't know if it has voice acting. I think it does, just like
Hades. It does.
So
Yeah,
I'm into
the main
it.
voice guy is actually Spike Spiegel from Cowboy
yeah,
Bebop.
hell yeah, or Toonami guy. I don't know his name.
Or
but
Toonami guy.
Yeah,
I don't know
Toonami
either.
robot.
The game is awesome. It was actually really brilliant game design. Talking about using the Switch's hardware to full fidelity, they basically styled it like a PS2 or like a Dreamcast game is probably more appropriate. So it's very polygonal, very low res, but just focused on this really high-paced, clever puzzle platforming shooting game. It's really hard to describe. It's very unique. It's very approachable, not terribly difficult, and very satisfying, with honestly a dynamite soundtrack. So I would recommend Neon White if the price is right for your budget, because I had a lot of fun playing it, and I intend to get back to it and finish it here soon.
I'm super interested, and I will be picking it up, I'm sure, because Neon White is not a Nintendo game, so I trust that it will go on sale.
You can play it on PC as well.
I might do that.
That might be the
yeah,
place for you.
I might do that. Speaking of games that are stylized very simply and create a rich experience, it's fucking Vampire Survivors, baby.
Buddy, I've spent so many hours on this game, considering how simple it is. I am in awe of how much I'm enjoying this game, even today.
For starters, if there's one game you pick up and you're frugal, Vampire Survivors is a $5 video game. The DLC is $2. And if that wasn't enough, you can play it for free on Game Pass. Play Vampire Survivors. Yeah, it's completely free on mobile as well.
I've played through almost the entire game on my phone after completing it 100% on my computer.
The game is great. Awesome. It feels like, you know what? I haven't thought about this until just now, but Vampire Survivors feels like the culmination of Flash games. The best of Flash games.
Yeah.
Like they've been distilled into what made them so fun to play in middle school, in math class, and get in trouble on your computer.
That's actually a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's because it has that Flash game mentality. It's you pick it up and play it. You can pick it up and play it in sessions. You know, a run is a maximum. Well, all right, this is debatable, but for the most part, a run is about 30 minutes. You can't really go much longer than that until very late in the game, and it's addicting as hell. It's so simple. Listen, we get it. The graphics look very basic. This looks like a Flash game until you get in there and you play it and you listen to the sound effects. You listen to the fucking dynamite music. You see the characters with these crazy visual effects. You see the creativity on display with the attacks and the artifacts you can collect. This game is more than it appears, and it is a perfect example of not judging a book by its cover. I implore you to play it. 10 out of 10. And if it wasn't for Elden Ring, this may very well be my game of the year, so we'll revisit this.
It's a contender for sure. I'm comfortable at this point calling it the indie game of the year. I don't think there's any argument against it. It's satisfying in a way that so few games are. All it really is just a blast of dopamine to your brain. The sound of hitting an enemy with one of the many, many weapons, the way that the chests open, the way that the levels are accumulated, and the way you pick up the experience gems. It's all designed in a way that's just so pleasing that makes you just want to play more and more and more. And I think that it's a very simple approach, but it shows really brilliant game design.
Yes, and I will also agree with you. Right here, folks, it's unanimous. The indie game of the year is Vampire Survivors for us. It's a blast to play. But I think one thing that not many people would observe this, but the fact that it's not predatory is something we don't appreciate enough. And I think that is what makes it so good. Yes, it's a constant surge of dopamine, but it's never predatory. You get out of the menu and it harkens back to like Hades, where you get back and you're like, oh, how do I unlock that? Oh, I just play more. I don't have to buy some microtransaction bullshit. I don't have to grind out a currency in some specific level that I can only get in the forest of fuck off. You can just get everything by playing the game more. And I think that's so interesting because, and we briefly talked about this, the guy who made this knows how to hit dopamine well. He was a slot machine developer before this. And he took what
Wow.
made those so successful and he turned it into a video game. And the fact that he was able to do that and still charge so little for it and still make it so not predatory, to make it so rewarding, so replayable, and so wholesome's a weird word to use here, but it really feels wholesome, like just a video game that wants to be a fun, replayable video game. The fact that he was able to do that after coming from, a background of developing gambling machines, which are intended to make you spend more money, that is commendable. And I think it's even more reason that this absolutely gets my indie game of the year.
I'm inclined to agree with you. Honestly, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but yeah, the loot box opening phenomenon that you get from, like an engram in Destiny or, a loot box in any of these many games, but having that without having to pay for them or really earn them through any effort, it's very satisfying. I hadn't considered that. And honestly, I understand exactly what you mean when you say he designed slot machines. That's, fuck.
It's on
That's
display.
The game.
when you open a chest and you hear that do 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 do, and you see the fucking colors ramping up, and you're like, yeah, you're dancing along. It's you hitting a jackpot at a slot machine. It's very much on display. But the word I'd use for it is refreshing. It's refreshing in an industry where everything is constantly being fucking nickel and dimed to death.
Can I share with you a couple other games that really surprised me this year?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to lump these two in because they're both shooters. I picked up 2 shooting games sort of on a whim that I wasn't quite sure how I'd feel about them, but I gave them a risk. I entered Proteus on early access on my PC. It's very rare to have a game that I'm dying to play on PC. And honestly, I forget where I even found it. But that game fucking rules. So it's like Doom, where you're in this pixel-based world. You have individual levels with a bunch of guns. You're fighting against demons and cyber demons, and there's different keys you have to pick up to progress into the levels. But everything, we talk about this refinement that comes with, age, I suppose. The developers of Proteus learned a lot from Doom and all of its many follow-ups and sequels and spin-offs and homages, and have created this insanely masterful delivery and modern feel. It feels like Doom Eternal, but it looks like the original Doom. And I was so surprised by how they pulled this off, and I really enjoyed it from start to finish. I thought the ending was a little half-baked. The jump from what I played in early access to what was in the 1.0 release was a lot less than I thought it would be. But I would recommend it to anybody who's a fan of those. I guess they're called boomer shooters.
Hey, look at that. New term for yourself. Okay, boomer.
I'm huge on boomer shooters, dude. Doom. I'm literally playing Doom 64 right now.
It is really interesting that you bring up being true to a game's original aesthetic and intention, but having the mechanics of a modern game. I think that's quite fascinating, and it's something that you don't see a whole lot today. I
think it's very difficult to pull it off.
I do
honestly.
too, and I think there's a game that, you know what's coming. I played a great game this year, folks, and we'll discuss that at the end, because it didn't come out this year, but that really has a lot of that in it. I'm excited to talk about it, because it's just like that. I think that's what makes it so good. Just like you said, it's a game that takes an old design and infuses fresh mechanics and creativity into it to create what almost feels like a spiritual successor to a game that was widely respected, like you with Proteus and the Doom games. So I'm excited to get into that. But
let me just touch briefly on Metal Hellsinger.
Oh yeah,
since
go for it.
It's another similar shooter. It's basically like Doom Eternal meets Guitar Hero. You've got these incredibly powerful metal tracks that get more involved and more in depth the better your score multiplier is. And ultimately what it is just very involved rhythmic shooting game. You shoot on time with the beat, and the music's dynamite, the gameplay feels great. The enemies are not terribly interesting, and the bosses are all repeated, so it's not perfect, but it was just a really satisfying way to play, these little 10-15 minute segments after work, or, when I just kind of needed to unwind. Loved it. Would definitely recommend picking it up on sale if you like heavy metal. The music is seriously, it cannot be topped. I've been listening to it on YouTube, and it's all phenomenal. Case?
Hell yeah, dude. I was muted. Hell yeah, dude. That's a pretty good lead into Cult of the Lamb for me. Cult of the Lamb people loved, but it's not a long game by any means. This is a 20-hour game. You can knock it out. It was like that as well. This was a pretty chill game to play, like in smaller sessions. It was, honestly, it has something in common with Marvel's Midnight Suns, because it's a game where you go in and you do some roguelike combat, and then you come out and you do, the best way I could put it is maybe a hybrid of like Animal Crossing and Harvest Moon type base building and city building. But it's a lot simpler than all that sounds, and just really a charming game about a sheep that is serving a demonic god and killing his followers and turning them into sacrifices.
I was interested enough in this game, but it just came out at a tough time in my calendar to devote any real time to it. So forgive me for not picking this one up, but I like the concept of it a lot, honestly.
Yeah, it just struck at the perfect time for me. I had free time. People were raving about it. It was $20 on Steam. So it was a perfect storm. And, you know, it's always a delight when that happens. I think the last time that happened was Hades. And while this didn't obviously live up to the behemoth that was Hades, I thought it was pretty close in terms of, wow, I really got my money's worth out of this.
So I'm going to take a transition into, I'm going to use the excuse. Let's talk about games that are living up to the expectations, or maybe not. Casey, let's talk about God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah, we have a talk to have here.
Yeah. This was a tough one for our relationship, because I thought this game was absolutely captivating. It really did everything that I wanted it to do, and I don't think you had the same experience, did you?
I did not, and you are not my only friend who I have frayed things with when it comes to God of War relations now. I am the devil's advocate here. I am in the absolute minority. I'm aware of this fact, and I'm not just trying to be facetious. This game did not live up for me, and there's reasons behind that. I guess I'll start off with because everyone's heard the great things about God of War by now. Let me talk about some things I didn't like, and one of them's more common. Some aren't as common, but the common one that I think everyone can at least agree with somewhat. Good Lord, the hand-holding in the puzzle segments of this game are brutal and make puzzle sections a fucking slog to get through.
Yeah, big time.
Imagine a puzzle segment in any game that you enjoy that isn't God of War, and insert Atreus and what's the head guy's name?
That's Mimir, brother.
Mimir. I almost said Ymir, but I've been watching too much Attack on Titan. Mimir and Atreus, insert them into that game of your choosing. Insert them into, like, Ocarina of Time. Insert them into Outer Wilds. Insert them into The Witness.
You've got to hit the back of the Skulltula, brother.
Yeah. Or put it in a combat game, too. Get set on fire in Destiny. You're on fire, brother. It'll pass. You're on fire,
You've got to hit
brother.
the gem with your boomerang, brother.
If you come over here to the red barrel marked red, it's red because it indicates there's gasoline inside the barrel, which hitting with a firearm would set off a spark which would detonate the red barrel, usually damaging areas around it in a large area of effect type blast, brother.
We're being a little hyperbolic, but I think that it's fair to criticize the game for not being able to turn that off.
Well, here's the thing.
Because, yeah.
We're really not being that hyperbolic. It is that quick after you're in a puzzle. As soon as you're in a puzzle and you look at a thing the wrong way, Mimir's going to start fucking piping up, and he's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. Atreus is going to roast you for not doing a thing 30 seconds into trying to solve a puzzle on your own. Like you said, yes, this is the thing that needs to be able to be disabled. It has probably the most extensive quality of life and accessibility menu I've seen this year, which it deserves a lot of credit for, by the way. But it has all that shit, and it makes it even more glaring of an oversight that you can't turn off, like, puzzle hints or puzzle dialogue. I'd be okay just shutting them the fuck up entirely in puzzle segments until I solve it. It's really that bad for me. And granted,
I think the easy fix would just be to install a button that says, like, I need a hint, I'm stuck, or find some way to do that.
yes.
Because the rate at which they blast out a hint doesn't give you any time to really navigate the puzzle on your own. And there's a lot of satisfaction that comes in finding that solution on your own, and it takes it away from you in a really dissatisfying way.
Yeah, I'm not even a guy that likes puzzles that much. I'm the kind of guy who will look something up after a certain amount of trying on my own, but I like having that option to seek the answer on my own. I don't like the game immediately piping up 14 seconds into a puzzle space before I've even looked at all the mechanics of the puzzle and hearing the solution. It ruined a lot of this game for me because there's a lot of puzzle segments in this game. I mean, they can't be ignored. And I'm not trying to say the game is bad because of it, but I am trying to say that me, as a person who likes exploring and figuring things out on my own, to an extent, didn't even get that opportunity. When I did in God of War 1, that was something they regressed on. So I gotta call that out. That was a big, big hindrance for me. And I think I'd be a lot more chummy about the game if they eventually implement a way to turn that off or reduce it drastically.
I think that they will. I think that when they approach a New Game Plus, they might include that as a feature. They made a late New Game Plus for the original God of War that came out a while after the original release. And so I know that that's been the key criticism. That's like something actionable that they can fix. So I hope to see that in a future update. I will say I loved playing the game so much that I didn't really make time for any other games while I was playing it. And I platinumed it without putting it down. So I really enjoyed it. I will say I think the ending fell a little flat story-wise. I was a little disappointed by the conclusion, particularly the final boss fight. I do think they're trying to set up for another game in the series. I don't quite know what that's going to look like. But all in all, I thought it was a masterpiece. I thought it was incredible, and I look forward to playing it again.
Yeah, I'm at least familiar with the story and how it ends up. I ended up bouncing off this about halfway through. And I also agree that I'm excited to see where it goes because I do not think this is... I mean, okay, it's like saying this is the last Mario game, right? We know this is going to continue, but in terms of what they've done with Kratos in these Norse mythology games, I don't think they're quite done with that yet, so I'm excited to see what happens. And it might take a different form than what we're currently used to for the last 5 years or however long it's been. But this one needs a couple quality of life fixes for me because it's just, I want to like the game. And that's the thing, right? It's kind of like the Pokemon Scarlet Violet thing. I was able to overlook those flaws because I really liked what was there. With God of War, that scale was not able to tip enough for me. The things that bothered me outweighed the things that I was enjoying. So I don't know, I'm giving myself an aneurysm here, but you kind of see what I mean. Like the balance was off for me. The balance of things I enjoyed to things that pestered me was out of whack, and I unfortunately couldn't overcome that. So I do really, truly, if they do something about this, or even if I'm just find myself in a mood where I'm willing to put up with it, I really want to give this a fair shake, but that wasn't me when I played it and when it came out. I wasn't willing to do that because I had so many other games I was playing that I was enjoying that didn't bother me.
I thought the game of the year was going to come down to Elden Ring versus God of War Ragnarok, and at their core, I think they want to deliver a similar feeling. They want to make you feel powerful in a world and overcome challenges by delivering that through gameplay, whereas Elden Ring is the really story light version, and God of War Ragnarok, like I sort of mentioned earlier to compare it to Last of Us, uses your character as a device to deliver emotion, but still has a really fucking good combat system. Let me make that very clear. This game has incredible combat. I was a little let down, I think, that it wasn't a closer discussion for me, I guess in my inner monologue. Elden Ring stood out so far above God of War Ragnarok, despite me really loving God of War Ragnarok. I just felt like it really has some room to grow in all of the ways you discussed. But overall, like, I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10. I think the game was truly phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm only so critical of it because I had such high expectations for it, because I had such lofty goals for it. God of War...
And that's the sequelitis of it a little bit.
It is,
You have to compare it to the game that came before, and honestly, it really doesn't feel that different from the one that came out in 2018. At the beginning of God of War Ragnarok, you start with both of the weapons you acquired during God of War 2018. Atreus is older, all of the character progression is where it is, and you don't have to go and like re-find these characters. You really pick up exactly where you left off.
It's a direct sequel that feels like, and okay, so people have thrown this around lightly. I'm going to unpack it a little more than this, and I don't want this to sound like I'm bashing the game for being too samey. But I think this could have been a DLC. I think this could have been a well thought out, hugely developed. I'm not saying they had to release it as like a free thing, a year later. They still could have made it like, hey, here you go. But it could have been an expansion of this game. There's nothing about this, I think, especially because it's on PS4 still, that was different than the original enough to warrant a completely new game. It's fine as a new game. I think we all agree with that. I don't think anybody minded paying for the sequel. But yeah, that's the sequelitis of it. It really is. And because I liked God of War so much when it came out, I think it was 2018, I really was expecting this to knock my fucking socks off. And it didn't, unfortunately. And that might be unfair expectations on my part. Or maybe I just thought the story was going to go a little bigger, a little quicker. But this really just felt like part two to like a two-part movie. This felt like the end game to Infinity War, to use that reference
I was just thinking that. Literally, I was just thinking that.
Like, it's not complete without the other. But it's not a standalone thing either. It's not a new Avengers movie. It's a direct continuation of something you've already seen and already experienced. It's the ending to that story. I
really don't think you can play this one without having played God of War 2018.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You can't. It's frankly a disservice to you and to the game and the story in these games to do that. This is a sequel, and you gotta see the first part. This is not a thing. It's not Avatar: The Shape of Water. You can't go in and have your girlfriend fill you in on the shit. This needs to be experienced in both parts. And while I didn't like Ragnarok as much as most people did, I can respect that it is absolutely a Game of the Year contender in its own regard, but unfortunately, Elden Ring was not here to fuck around, and I think the choice was clear for me too.
So let's move on from God of War Ragnarok. I think it's appropriate for us to discuss the last couple games that came out this year. I want to bring up Bayonetta 3, which I've got some takes on. Did you have any other games that you really wanted to dive into before we move on to the next segment?
I don't think that I have. I think Citizen Sleeper's worth a mention for me. So I'll talk about that briefly, but go ahead and tackle Bayonetta first, because I know that you, my friend, as a lifelong, I guess not lifelong, but as long as it's been out, Bayonetta fan, did not love Bayonetta 3. And I find that shocking, and I'd love to know why.
Yeah, so Casey, I remember playing a lot of Bayonetta when we lived together back in college, because that was one of those games that I just would replay, like Devil May Cry 3. You could put Bayonetta in front of me, and I would end up beating it in that week, just because I'm like, it's here, I love it, it's satisfying, it's really great to play. I have a very, very strong attraction to the first Bayonetta game. I think it's just a masterpiece, truly a masterpiece. It does everything that the Devil May Cry series did at its best. I thought the story was engaging enough without taking itself too seriously. The set pieces were tremendous. Bayonetta 1 is a 10 out of 10 for me. Bayonetta 2 came out on the Wii U, so I didn't play it until they ported it to the Switch, and I really enjoyed it. I thought that they really improved on all of the gameplay. I thought that the story was a little weaker than in the first game, but it still made sense. They built upon what they established in the first game in a way that was, satisfying enough to get through. Bayonetta 3 fucking throws All of that out the window. Everything that happens in Bayonetta 3, it's like it was written as a fan fiction. But worse, because it draws from entirely different source material. The main enemy in the game is this like really uninteresting green blob that calls itself homunculi, but really it's just, whatever the fuck they want to make it in this green goo that fills these little shells. It is the most uninteresting enemy design I think I've seen in a game, which broke me, because this was the first time I stopped playing a Bayonetta game midway. I just gave up. I just didn't want to play it anymore. And honestly, it was because the enemy design first and foremost. It was just boring to play.
Yeah, that's a shame. I was never into the Bayonetta games, but it's always a bummer. I mean, honestly, Bayonetta 3 for you is my God of War Ragnarok experience, right? It's a game you wanted to love, I'm sure, and were fucking gassed up about. And then, unfortunately, it fell flat, and maybe not even for reasons that people agree with, because I haven't heard a ton of bad conversation about Bayonetta 3, obviously excluding the voice acting woes that happened to it in development. So I think we can relate there, right? Like, every part of me wanted to like God of War. I think every part of you probably wanted to love Bayonetta 3 the way you just raved about it. But some games just fall flat when they... I guess another case of the sequelitis. Though it sounds like your issues were a little more with the lack of faith to what made it successful. Is that an accurate assumption?
I think that's a pretty surface level look at it, but it's not wrong. I think that they got sort of lost in the sauce on how to scale up the game. The first Bayonetta, the ultimate enemy, is this like giant universal threat. It's huge. The scale of the game was pretty unprecedented. The second game, similarly, it was all about the time stream, and the boss was this like representative of the time stream. And so what they did for Bayonetta 3 was they took it multiversal, which is all the rage these days. You've got Doctor Strange multiverse, you've got Rick and Morty multiverse, you've got the DC multiverse, you've got Everything Everywhere All at Once the multiverse. Yeah. So why not Bayonetta 3 as well? And the way that they delivered that product was Bayonetta had less room to be an interesting character. In the previous games, she was this incredibly confident, really cocky and mocking character who would play with her enemies and sexualize them and just totally dominate them in the way that a dominatrix does. And she had all this like freedom and power to her. In this game, they barely let her talk. I feel like everything that happens is somebody talking to her, and she'll make a quip, and then you'll go and you'll have to just watch all this other shit happens. It was insane to see how they neutered her. And I did hear about, the bad press around Helena Taylor, the original voice actor, and what happened there. There was some bad press that came out before the game was released about the ending and what it did for, gay erasure and just, poor character choices. But I bought it all the same because I figured at least the gameplay would be fun. And I'll tell you, it just doesn't match what I expected after Bayonetta 2. Bayonetta 2 is such a sharp and clean experience with incredibly interesting combat design. Bayonetta 3 has some good concepts, but it just doesn't perform well for all the same reasons that we've discussed with the issue of Nintendo games on the Switches. It just felt like this game, for all the optimization they did, and they did a fair enough job for it, was too big for the Switch.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason the enemy design was so shitty is because they had to make these enemies on the Switch. You get all these abilities to turn into monsters and summon giant monsters, and the concepts are cool, but what they ended up taking away as a result of that, I thought the cost was too great for the return on investment.
Man, so much of that sounds like criticisms that I gave to one of my favorite games of all time, Kingdom Hearts 2, its sequel, Kingdom Hearts 3, when it came out.
Big time. Honestly, I think that's a spot-on comparison.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds
You
like...
and I both loved Kingdom Hearts 2,
Yep,
and when Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, it was just dire.
And it kind of sounds so similar in many ways, right? Like, so much of the game in Kingdom Hearts 3 felt like shoehorning in really dog water Disney sequences, or at least in 2 they felt like they had heart put into them, connection, the stories of the light versus the darkness, and the Disney shit didn't feel like they were just tacked on. They felt blended together in a way that you felt involved in these Disney worlds. 3 didn't do any of that. It all felt tacked on. Kind of the way you talked about how Bayonetta 3 felt like it was just working on expanding the scope without giving the characters any time to do what people like the characters for. The combat, same thing. Kingdom Hearts 2 has the best combat in terms of like an action RPG. Best combat I've ever fucking played in my life. I really don't think it'll ever be topped. And then 3 introduced, I'm gonna ride the pirate ship Disney ride as my attack. First of all, why? Nobody asked for this. But secondly, yeah, it takes away drive modes, valor, wisdom, the shadow mode. These things were fucking cool. Why did you take them out and try to replace them with another gimmick that's a lot worse and doesn't run nearly as well? It sounds like kind of the same tragedy, and I can relate to you because I have never forgotten about the disservice I was dealt with Kingdom Hearts 3. All right.
Yeah, what they took away outweighed what they put into it. You used to be able to change, like have different weapons in your hands and your feet, so you'd have like different combinations that would perform, different combos. And in Bayonetta 3, you can only have one weapon on at a time. So you no longer have the ability to like use guns in your hands, but have ice skates on your heels, or have like a whip on top and shotguns in your heels. And so I found that to just be like really disappointing because a lot of that is what I enjoyed about the previous games. Yeah. So I hate to say it, but Bayonetta 3 gets my blunder of the year just because of how disappointed I was.
Oh.
It hurts. It hurts, Case.
Damn. That's crazy.
This is the second year in a row where my blunder has been a game that I was insanely excited for. Axiom Verge 2 last year, the hype around that was so high until I played it. Same with Bayonetta 3, man. It really broke my heart. Really did.
I'm glad that I have other options because I think if I gave Blunder of the Year to God of War, I'd probably be assassinated.
I'd have to kill you.
Yeah, okay, so you would do it. I was going to say, someone would assassinate me for saying that. I don't... that leaves me to kind of thinking about what I thought was my blunder of the year. And I think... This is crazy, right? This is... If Elden Ring didn't come out, there would have been a real possibility that I gave Scarlet and Violet Game of the Year and Blunder of the Year, which would have been quite an enigma. But I gotta give it to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and I've already discussed in depth how much I like that game. But the other half of that coin was the bad shit that I was able to push aside, but it was bad. This game was $60, and it was released in an inexcusable sorry state. There's no getting around that. No matter how much you enjoy the game, this is a pathetic offering from Nintendo in terms of performance, in terms of the graphics, and in terms of releasing a finished game. Blunder of the Year goes to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, a game that I loved, which is a first, maybe. But it's been a weird year. It's been a weird year.
Yeah, it's well deserved, I think. And I hate to rag on Pokemon because I do love the franchise so much and I want to love it, but fuck, boys, that ain't it.
You know what? Guys, please send this episode to someone at Nintendo. Maybe your friend knows an uncle who works at Nintendo who could give you Pika blood. Send this to them. They need to see this. Hear this, I guess.
Let's hear about Citizen Sleeper and then let's take a break.
Yeah, let's do Citizen Sleeper quick. Citizen Sleeper is a game that I wanted to bring up because I do think it's something really special. But like many of the games, especially earlier in this episode, there's a demographic for it and it isn't me. I don't think there's enough of the gameplay that I enjoy in this game. This game is a narrative game 100%. Your gameplay will consist of rolling 5 dice, and I mean D6 for you D&D nerds, a dice, a basic Yahtzee dice, and you get 5 dice rolls a day, and you decide where to spend those dice. And yeah, sure, there's a modicum of strategy involved, but mostly it's just time management and getting narrative. So, if you're into that, cool. I had to discuss it because the artwork's great, the atmosphere's great, the soundtrack is great, but it is a game that is very, very fucking light on the gameplay. But especially because it won Games for Impact. I believe it snagged that this year. Maybe it didn't. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But it was nominated for it, and that's what put it on my radar. I check all of those out every year. The Game Awards Games for Impact, because I've had some really good experiences from those. And this was one that I enjoyed to a point, but then I realized I was just reading a book. And, credit to them. This is a book that I think is worth reading, but go into it knowing you are reading a book. For me, I was kind of looking for more of a game, so I put it down.
Yeah, it's on the opposite spectrum of Elden Ring. If God of War Ragnarok is in the middle as balancing story and game, that I feel like Citizen Sleeper is kind of similar to Disco Elysium, really focuses on the story and having agency in that story. But the game element is, choosing how to deliver those dice into the things that you want to accomplish with them. And that's great for some people. Disco Elysium was highly praised, and I did not enjoy it even a little bit. So I stayed away from Citizen Sleeper, and I imagine that was your similar experience.
Yes, actually, it has a lot in common with... So I don't know about Immortality, which was on our list, but I think it's probably a lot of the same there. I played Her Story, which was the Immortality devs game that came prior, and Her Story was the same thing, right? It was, hey, you are a player in this in the sense that you get to choose how the story unfolds. It's only a game in the sense that a choose your own adventure book is a game. And you know what? I'm not knocking choose your own adventure books, and I don't think you are either. I think we're in agreement about that, but yeah, as we've said, there's a demographic for that, and I don't think either of us are necessarily in that.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to say that those who enjoy those types of games will really like Citizen Sleeper. It's been getting a lot of good press.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Not for me or Case.
Yeah, if you want story, definitely check out Citizen Sleeper. I really do think it's a special thing they've made, but you got to go into it knowing that you're going to be in the passenger seat for, however long it is, probably a good 20 hours.
Well, hey, Case, with that, let's take a break. We'll come back and discuss some of the game ancillary topics that we experienced this year, and then we'll look forward to the next year after that.
Indeed, sounds good. Let's take a little breather.
All right, folks, we are back, and I think what we have next on the agenda is we wanted to talk about a couple games we played this year that came out in other years. And I know you've got some pretty strong opinions on yours, Case. So let me just briefly talk about mine. Solar Ash is the name of the game, and it's from the developers of Hyper Light Drifter, Heart Machine Games. Did you play Hyper Light Drifter?
I did. I really liked it. I'm not sure that I finished. I think I did. I confuse it with... There was another game that came out that reminded me immensely of that, and I played that one. There was one of the two that I didn't finish. I believe Hyper Light Drifter is the one with the big, Titan fucking things, and it's like a dilapidated world. A lot of dodging.
Yeah.
Okay, then I think I'm thinking of the right one. Loved that game.
Hyper Light Drifter very much took inspiration from Dark Souls. Solar Ash was the team's first attempt at a three-dimensional game. It had a really interesting, unique art style and a really cool world design. The character that you play as, you would skate through the world, on solar skates or whatever the fuck they're called. And effectively what it turned into is part exploration, part Shadow of the Colossus, where you would just go around and unlock these giant beasts, and then once you did, you'd have to climb across their bodies and quickly hit different parts of them by skating around on their bodies. It was a cool idea, but I just felt it was really lacking. It got really repetitive. I found that the world was not that interesting to explore, and ultimately the conclusion didn't feel terribly worth it. I think they had some big hopes, but I just don't think they nailed it on this one. It came out at the very end of 2021, so I didn't have a chance to play it until early this year, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because otherwise I would have brought it up on our GOTY episode last year.
Yeah, on paper it sounds great, and now that you bring it up, I know exactly the game you're talking about, because I remember when the trailers came out, I saw that it was you said Heart Machine, right? I think that's who made it.
Yeah,
and I remember seeing that come up. It must have been at the Game Awards or something. It was at some show, and I remember being stoked because I was like, "Oh shit, that's the Hyper Light Drifter guys." I kind of assumed it would be a Risk of Rain 2 situation, right? That they would nail the landing, but that's not exactly realistic. It's a hard jump to make, and while Risk of Rain 2 is a great example of making the leap from particularly pixelated 2D to 3D, it seems like this one didn't stick the landing for you, and that's a bummer. But I believe they're making another one, right? Like another Hyper Light Drifter that is also trying to be 3D?
They're making another game called Hyper Light Breaker, which is going to be some sort of follow-up to Hyper Light Drifter. What I think is happening here is that Solar Ash was made as sort of an in-between game so they could test out what Hyper Light Drifter would look like in 3D.
Yeah, proof of concept.
It really felt like they were trying to bring in Hyper Light Drifter into Solar Ash without putting Hyper Light Drifter's name on it. So I imagine their next game is hopefully going to fix all of the issues that I had with Solar Ash.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like what they were trying to do with Pokemon, clearly. Obviously, technical issues aside, we've ranted about that enough. Arceus felt like a proof of concept for what would become Scarlet Violet. And some of the things that would be implemented there. I think this might be the same situation, yeah, like you said. It's a proving ground for some ideas they might want to do. And I gotta imagine if they're slapping the Hyperlight sticker on Breaker, I have faith that it's going to be enjoyed more by my friend Craig. I'll put it that way, because I'm not sure that it'll necessarily slay, but I think, yeah, if they're slapping that title on, they gotta be proud of it.
I think it'll be worth the price. I have faith in the team to learn from their mistakes. Hyper Light Drifter was such a knockout that you know they'll get one bad one. If Hyper Light Drifter sucks, or I'm sorry, if Hyper Light Breaker sucks, then I'll probably pass on future installments. But you know what? I didn't knock Supergiant for when I didn't like Pyre. I'm not going to knock these guys for when I didn't like Solar Ash.
They can't all be home runs, and as Spider-Man says to Peter Griffin in Family Guy, everybody gets one.
All right, buddy. Tell me about your game of the other year here.
All right, folks, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you about Outer Wilds. And I want to clarify that I am not talking about the Obsidian RPG that is on Game Pass. That is Outer Worlds. That is
I accidentally bought that game on sale. And
many people
it went
did.
Straight into my folder.
Many people did. This is not Outer Worlds. That is a AAA RPG funded by Microsoft. Outer Wilds is an indie single-player space mystery game. Is what I would call it.
What does that mean?
Oh, let me unpack it for you. And first of all, let me just say, if this game came out this year, and I don't say this lightly, I think this would have gone toe-to-toe with Elden Ring and very well could have taken the crown. But,
wow, shit.
I don't say that lightly. But this is a game from 2019, so hey, I don't have to worry about that stress. Outer Wilds is a difficult game to talk about because so much of its experience depends on you being completely blind going in. It's very difficult to talk about the best moments of this game without ruining that experience, and so I have to be deliberately very careful about what I say. But think of Majora's Mask as a start. That's a great place to spring off from. This is a game that largely focuses on time and managing your time while you explore a solar system. And the things that you explore are completely up to you. You can go explore, planet X, Y, or Z in any given order. You're not given any instructions in the beginning. You just get a ship and you get a solar system to explore. As you do that, you'll start to create threads of knowledge. And that's kind of the currency or the upgrades in Outer Wilds is knowledge. This is a game with no combat. This is a game with no upgrades. And you got to go into it knowing that, because it really, really changes the way you view the game. A brief anecdote. I played this game close to when it came out, and I bounced off it completely because I thought I was doing something wrong. I couldn't figure what the fuck I was supposed to do on a certain planet. I'm not going to get into all that, but I couldn't figure it out, and I thought I was doing something wrong, and I kept thinking there's got to be a fucking upgrade I can get or something. When I came back to it years later this year, and in fact, like a week or two ago is when I played this, I went into it knowing that there's no upgrades. There's no experience. There's no leveling up. There's nothing you can get in the game that's going to make you any better at the game except for knowledge. You figure things out. You solve a mystery. You take notes in a virtual notepad in the game. Thankfully, you don't have to do that on your own. It'll do it for you, and you learn something
huge.
important.
Thank God.
And you'll create these links to different things, and eventually you'll start to unravel this mystery. You'll have so many fucking eureka moments in this game that I haven't experienced something like that in such a long time. Audibly saying, oh shit, I think I just figured something out. Think of the last time you played a game where you were starting to fall asleep and you figured out the solution to a puzzle. This game is full of that shit, and it's fucking incredible. I highly recommend it. I'm sorry I'm swearing like a sailor, but I can't really do much else to express how much I love this experience, because again, this is about all I can say. You gotta play it for yourself if you're interested in this kind of game, if you're interested in space, if you're interested in time mechanics that are similar to Majora's Mask, and if you're interested in solving a mystery completely isolated and feeling alone and feeling like you're really in a single-player game, you gotta check this game out.
I'm very interested in checking it out, man. I understand you gotta keep your mouth sealed a little bit for risk of spoiling the big turn of the key here, but I've heard nothing but massive praise for this game. And I'm for a game for coming off of criticizing two story driven games like Disco Elysium and Citizen Sleeper. You think I would be less hyped for this one, but I'm dying to get my hands on it. And at some point here, I'll pick it up if I see it on sale, because I figure it's probably overdue for one.
Absolutely. Depending on when you listen to this or whenever it comes out, it goes on sale fairly often. Right now it's on sale in the winter sale. I'm sure in the summer sale you'll get it for cheap. This is worth a play. It's got a DLC that I'm working through right now that is more of the same. It's just a little more challenging and a little more horror-driven. So, consider that if you like the first game. But, yeah, Outer Wilds, the base game, deserves, in fact, commands to be played. This is...
Wow. That's insanely high praise.
It is. This is alongside Hades for me. This is one of the greatest indie games ever made. Just like your praise for Elden Ring, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna go for the half court shot. This is one of the greatest indie games ever made. In fact, we'll see how I feel after maybe another replay down the line, but maybe someday it'll earn its spot in the best game ever made list. But for now, absolutely one of the best indie game experiences you can have. Go in blind if you play this.
All right. Well, shit, man. I'm looking forward to playing it. Let's talk now about a couple of things that came out this year that weren't necessarily video games, but were video game adjacent. We got treated to a couple of good pieces of media, a movie and a series in the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the movie, and Cyberpunk 2077 Edgerunners. I think both of these prove that just because it's a video game adaptation doesn't mean it has to stay too true to the video game it came from, but also that these things can be great, man. What was your experience with them?
I didn't get my hands on Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I didn't watch the first movie, and
oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I have no experience with the movies other than knowing like Ben Schwartz does the voice of Sonic, which I think is hilarious. But
yeah,
and I've heard they're good movies. It never was really something I looked into. I'm not a guy that goes to movies really anymore in theaters. I'm more of a home cinema guy. And this was never something that was and this is no disrespect to this film, but obviously Sonic was not high on my list above like a lot of the bangers that have been coming out. So it's hard for me to find time to watch those movies. But I've heard good things. Edge Runners, on the other hand, watched that, easily on par with Arcane. I enjoyed that this year at the Game Awards, the battle between best video game adaptation was between Arcane and Edge Runners, because to me, those two feel like the most relevant examples of a video game adaptation done right. I think we talked about Arcane last year, so it's only fitting that we get some time with Edge Runners this year. What a show.
Yeah, and just to comment quickly on Sonic the Hedgehog 2, it was more of the same. If you like the first movie, I think you'll like the second. They're taking a lot of charms. They're taking a lot of good stuff out of the games, particularly like the Sonic Adventure games now recently. So I think that it's just kind of fun to see this series who's had clunky video games come out with some pretty fun movies. I think that's about as in-depth as I am capable of going on Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but I enjoyed watching it. I've seen it a couple times.
Am I allowed to, like, how old is this movie? Can I, like, say a spoiler, like a post-credit spoiler?
No.
Okay, well, I like what they're going to do with the sequel, very obviously. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Because I'm aware of that,
for the inevitable
and
Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
That'll be cool. I might actually go see that one just because of the absurdity of the premise.
So, with Cyberpunk Edgerunners, let's discuss it in relation to Arcane, because I think I liked Arcane a little bit more. I think Arcane did something a little more special than Cyberpunk Edgerunners did, but it was a Studio Trigger anime, so I'm already hype as fuck. Studio Trigger's been behind pretty much all of my favorite anime since like 2008 or whenever they came out with, I guess they didn't come out with Gurren Lagann, but Gainax, which most of the people at Gainax did, turn into
I
Studio
absolutely
Trigger.
count, Gurren Lagann as a trigger. To me, that's like their first anime.
Yeah. It took the source material in a really interesting way. What I think I enjoyed so much about Edgerunners is that this bleak world that the game really paints as just dim and dire, they found a lot of joy in Edgerunners. They gave you a lot of like bright and energetic characters in the way that you expect from Studio Trigger, but it compared to like the actual game, it was just so much more joyous to experience that anime.
Yeah, so I agree with you to an extent, right? I mean, obviously, I'll preface it with saying Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a show that gets dark, and those dark moments hit. But I totally agree with you. The overall feel of it is more kind of whimsical, kind of, hey, this is supposed to be a fun romp at the end of the day, despite having moments of darkness. And I think the Cyberpunk game, from what I played, was kind of the opposite. Hey, this is supposed to be a really dark time with moments of fun romp. And I prefer the former. I prefer what the anime did. I too was instantly on board when I found out it was Trigger. Lately, I'm going to be honest, I haven't been like totally in love with Trigger's work. I didn't think the Star Wars episodes were necessarily anything great. In fact, I think that was one of their weaker showings. And the movie that came out, Promare, I think it was fine. But yeah, I think they've struggled kind of to find their footing since Darling in the Franxx and everything that came before that.
You didn't watch Brand New Animal, though. Brand New Animal was pretty fresh and unique, and I think you're missing a key part of that progression.
For sure. I think my point is more just, it's been a bit since I've been excited about Trigger. I was for this, because regardless of its connection to the game, I think, Cyberpunk as a genre is super fun to explore, and I wasn't disappointed here. It had a lot in common with Arcane, and I think the biggest thing is that you don't need to know a fucking thing about the Cyberpunk game going into this. I pretty much didn't, and I had a great time with it. And I think that is, so far, in the video game adaptations we've seen that have been a success, there's one thing that they all have in common. You don't need to know a fucking thing about the game going into it. And that's something that is so hard to get right, because a lot of movies and adaptations try to do that, and they fucking biff it. So I'm curious, what do you think is the link between Edgerunners, between the Sonic movies, between Arcane and The Witcher, the Witcher show on Netflix that came out, Castlevania? What is it about these things that is making them a success? Because I promise, if there's any executives at Netflix or other streaming services listening to this, they're going to want to know too. What is it for you as a viewer?
I think it's the same as it is with all of the media, with things that aren't necessarily adaptations. It comes down to the characters. I think the big key for Edgerunners is that you have this likable character in David. You like the character Lucy. You start getting along with the Edgerunners, Maine, Rebecca, Falco, all these really cool characters. You fall in love with them and you just want to see what they're up to and you want to see them, succeed. And unfortunately, if they don't succeed, then you feel that pain with them. Same with Arcane. I really fell in love with Powder and Jinx and, Vander and the same with Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, Sonic was just such a likable character in those movies. Castlevania, oh, fuck, I love Castlevania. That show slapped so much ass. And I think Castlevania's biggest success is incorporating the expanded Castlevania universe and changing it to better fit the plot of the show. That came out years ago, and I'm not going to get into it because I'll never shut up. But Castlevania was a serious triumph in all of its seasons.
Yeah, I saw the first season and I loved it. I got to watch the rest eventually. But yeah, you know what?
It's such a
guess
treat.
Characters is something I didn't think about. I didn't even consider that, to be honest with you. But it makes a lot of sense looking at it. There's a reason that The Witcher is bombing now that Henry Cavill's not in it, because he was such a good Geralt. And people tuned in to see him. I remember when I watched the first season of The Witcher with my friends, whenever something was happening that didn't involve The Witcher, I was like, okay, this is fine, but can we fucking get back to the good stuff? Let me see that guy, dude. This is why I'm watching this. Same with, Edgerunners is the same way. Arcane absolutely was the same thing. Arcane is the best example of the character work, but Edgerunners did it really well too. I think what Edgerunners did so well for me, if I had to point out a specific moment where I knew I was in, it was the way that the pilot is handled and the tragedy that happens to David that kicks everything off. Mm-hmm. That was done so tastefully and so painfully. And in that one episode, cyberpunk as a concept was captured more effectively than I think, and we've briefly spoken about this, and you may disagree, but I think it was done more effectively than the game ever did in that one scene. That was like the cyberpunk equivalent to me of like the scene in Up, the beginning of Up, where they go through
holy
that tragedy. Shit. Like, that set the tone for the show. That said, hey, fuck you, man. This is real cyberpunk.
I think you're spot on, man. Like, the intro and the characters, it's shocking because if you compare the intro of the actual game, it's so much longer, and I still don't think it has really the same effect as the anime did. It took me a while. So I played Cyberpunk 2077 after I watched Edgerunners, and the tonal shift really hit. Like I said, Edgerunners was a lot of fun, even up until the end. It was colorful, it was quick-paced, it was goofy. Cyberpunk 2077 it's colorful, and at some points it's fast-paced, but it's really not goofy. And it was a really big tonal shift, actually, going from the anime to the game in a way that I didn't automatically like it, but it really grew on me. I ended up playing like 160-something hours of Cyberpunk over the course of the year. That game really captured my heart after a while. Props to CD Projekt Red for really turning that around, because that was a blunder of the year a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
It sure was, yeah. And I completely agree with you. Like, one thing it succeeded at doing, I think, across the board, was at least getting people to try Cyberpunk again, the video game, after watching Edgerunners. I had the same experience as you. I watched the anime, and I downloaded the game again. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't able to quite breach that tonal shift. I got pretty far into it, but I was like, this just isn't the same experience I just had in Edgerunners, and I don't think it's going to become it, just because of what I know about the game and its tumultuous launch. For me, it kind of became okay, you know what? I will definitely play the next Cyberpunk game, which that in and of itself is an achievement for Project Red, CD Project Red. But the game as it is now, I was like, okay, this is cool, but I'm looking for more of the show. And I think they're very aware of the success of the show. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a little more risk taken in the sequel, which we now know is in development.
I think that there's a lot of truth in what you say. I honestly feel like Cyberpunk 2077 had some phenomenal writing. I'm really excited. They just announced at the Game Awards the Phantom Liberty expansion, which is starring Idris Elba, or he'll be in it in some capacity. But the whiplash around the tonal change is definitely a reason not to continue with it, because it really doesn't get any better. I think you just get a little more inoculated to that. What I'll say is... I just had a thought and then I lost it.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Truly.
Send it off to die in Night City, baby. That's the whole point of these games. You know what? Actually, joking aside, I think that is something that I think the show does so well. And I had this thought when I first saw it. Edgerunners nails what it is like to be a person in Night City. People die indiscriminately in that show. And, hey, I'm not going to tell you, but they might be characters you care about. They might be people you don't give a fuck about. But there's death every fucking scene. And everyone's so immune to that. Everyone deals with that in a way that we can't even comprehend. And that, I think, is such an effective look at true cyberpunk, at the true horrors of cyberpunk. Because, I got to be honest, even though the show is fun and whimsical a lot of the time, I think they nail it because cyberpunk isn't supposed to be that. And it isn't in the show. It's just that it feels that way. If that makes sense. I'm trying not to give anything away, so I'm really kind of being vague here. But
yeah, I think what we can say about it is that Cyberpunk Edgerunners takes place before Cyberpunk the game. And what's really interesting and very cyberpunk is that the show is referenced in the game. After it came out, they added in all these, references to the show. And you realize playing the game just how insignificant everything that happened in this gut-wrenching, heartwarming, and heartbreaking story, how insignificant that was to the world of Cyberpunk 2077.
Yes. A great example of this, and I'll try to make it quick because I'm not trying to go too off topic here, but people really enjoyed House of the Dragon this year. House of the Dragon, I think, has a lot of that same vibe. It's a great story so far. It's made people forget a little bit about how dog shit the ending to Game of Thrones was. But one of the things that keeps you watching, and one of the things that is so impactful as you watch, is realizing how much all these people went through, their relationships, their struggles, the wars they fought, the suffering they endured, and how truly insignificant it is when the pilot of Game of Thrones rolls. And I think that is something that is so effective in making a good prequel. So I totally agree. Edgerunners, I think we can both unanimously say, is absolutely worth a watch if you are a fan of that genre, if you're a fan of sci-fi, or even video games in general. This is one of the best adaptations that's been done, so check it out.
Yeah, I think it has the advantage of not necessarily being an adaptation of the story of the game, but more of just another story set in that world. I think it's a pretty effective advertisement for the game. So we spoke earlier about how, we bought the game or reinstalled the game after watching the anime. They were clever enough to put the game on sale for like $20, I think, when the anime went up on Netflix. And I gotta believe that sold people, on playing it, and it sold a ton of copies. Credit to CD Projekt Red. The game is incredibly playable. The writing is really fantastic, and you have a lot of agency in the world, a surprising amount. It felt a lot like playing what I kind of wished Fallout would be, in that you have this great power fantasy. It is RPG centric, but you're not like totally neutered by dumb bullshit like you are in Fallout 4.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, they definitely put it on sale, and we're not alone. Tons of people picked up the game to try it again. In fact, I think it sold more than, well, I don't want to just spout shit, but it sold a significant amount, and it was close to like what they originally sold. Like they sold gangbusters after the anime came out. So,
I do know for a fact that it had the most concurrent players ever after the anime came out.
Which is crazy. And so I also wouldn't expect this to be a thing, nor do I want it to be, but cheekily, I would like to give Cyberpunk Redemption of the Year. Maybe we'll see games that do that again, but maybe not. But thanks to Edge Runners,
I would love to see Pokemon Scarlet and Violet get Redemption of the Year next year.
You know what? I'd love to talk about this same time next year, and I can say, hey, isn't it crazy that brand new Nintendo console came out secretly and the game is fucking incredible and playable now? I think it's a little bit of wishful thinking, but I do think Cyberpunk deserves a nod. So I'm going to give it my Casey's unofficial Redemption of the Year award.
Yeah, if it came out in this condition this year, it would be a contender for Game of the Year. I don't think it would top Elden Ring, but it's in the arena, which is saying something.
And that's truly impressive given the state it launched in, and it was done with multimedia, which is incredible. And I think that is an exciting reality, and I look forward to seeing what happens. Wink, wink, nod, nod. I'm really looking forward to the inevitable Destiny multimedia that comes out.
We'll see. Hey, let's talk about things that are coming out. Let's look forward not to 2077, but to 2023. And some of the hot titles we can look forward to. I know that you and I are both looking at a pretty full list of releases expected to come out this year. Don't think we need to cover all of them, but let's highlight a few of them each that we're really hoping to see in full force this year.
For sure. I think mine are pretty obvious and predictable at this point, but I'll throw in a curveball at the end. Well, briefly, I'm not going to go over these in detail. Destiny 2 Lightfall, I'm a huge Destiny fan. I've already talked about it. Looks to be the beginning of an end of a very epic saga so far, once it picked its shit up and got its shit together. Tears of the Kingdom. It's really hard to say that. It's so...
It is. It doesn't roll off the tongue the same way that Breath of the Wild does. I really am
so used to saying Breath of the Wild, too. It's gonna take some getting used to. But Tears of the Kingdom... I mean, come the fuck on. What else can you say? It's a sequel to one of the best Zelda games ever made. In my opinion, maybe the best Zelda game ever made. But hey, you can go back and watch a previous Game of the Year for that. And finally, this is the one that might catch you off guard. Atomic Heart. This has been on my radar for years now.
What the fuck is Atomic Heart? I have it on the list, but I don't think I know what it is.
Atomic Heart is an FPS that takes place in so it's going to sound like I don't know shit about this game, and that's an accurate, that's to be expected, because it's a very weird, like, almost BioShock on crack world that is taking place, and it's post-apocalyptic very clearly, and it seems like there's some sort of nuclear power being used in robots and automatons that create these crazy boss fights. It looks super fast-paced. The graphics look great. And I've been excited about this since I first saw the trailer for it years ago now. I think this is what you'd call a AA game. It's not being made by a AAA studio, but it's not quite indie, because if you see the trailer, it looks breathtaking, frankly. This might be a total bust. I don't usually get jazzed for games like this, but something about Atomic Heart looks so fun. It really seems like the devs made this game to be fun. And as we've talked about a lot in this podcast, and to quote the great Reggie, if it's not fun, why bother?
Hey, Case, is this the game that's made by Ken Levine of BioShock?
I don't know. They are making a new BioShock, like, spiritual successor. This is not that, but it could be made by that person. We can look it up. Should we look it up?
I'm looking it up right now. Because Ken Levine made BioShock, and I heard he was working on a new IP.
So they did just reveal a new BioShock, like, spiritual IP at the Game Awards. I think that's what you're thinking of, because that was, like, literally in Rapture.
Oh, you know what? I'm thinking of a new game called called Judas. Totally different than what you're talking about. I'm sorry for derailing
No, that's
you.
the game, though. That's the game that they revealed at the Game Awards.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right on the money. But no, yeah,
Okay.
Atomic Heart, I don't know who's behind this. To be
mystery.
honest, it really sounds like I'm just being paid to shill it. Like, I don't know who makes it. I don't know what it's fucking about. But take a look at the trailer. I think there's something to be found there, and it's striking me in the right way. It seems like a post-apocalyptic, really cool version of that has shooter mechanics and looks goofy. And it's hitting me in all the right ways. So that would be my curveball that I'm looking forward to this next year.
Fuck yeah, buddy. I'm honestly excited for it too. It looks like it comes out in February. I'll have to check it out when it arrives.
Yeah, hell yeah.
So I'm really fucking stoked that hopefully, and my fingers are going to be crossed, hopefully we're going to see one of the next few games. Hollow Knight Silksong, which is in vaporware at this point. Metroid Prime 4, which is also vaporware at this point. But one of them that showed, I think at E3 maybe last year or 2 years ago, is a game called Pragmata. Do you remember that one with the astronaut?
I do not. I think the only thing I remember from E3 now that we're still waiting on is that one with like the really cool pixel graphics. That is like beautifully done. I know that's not very helpful, but I don't think that's
not
Pragmata.
helpful at all. If you remember, let me know. Pragmata had a very Kojima-esque trailer where there was like an astronaut on this like post-apocalyptic city, and then it ended up on the moon with this little girl. It was like I know nothing about it, but like it seems totally my shit.
It was in like a city, and then this shit started happening and like distorting in the sky. I do remember that now.
So I'm really excited to see if that ends up making it out this year. I think, honestly, the thing with Nintendo, and we just like shat on Nintendo for probably an hour, Metroid Prime 4 could come out and run perfectly. And like that's the magic of their console. More likely it's probably not, and they may be waiting for like next level hardware to release Metroid Prime 4, which I would not complain about. But fuck, man, I want Metroid. They announced Metroid Dread and released it within the same year last year, and I'm really hoping they're going to do that this year.
Well, there's certain games, you know, to put a cap on the Nintendo shit, we really fucking brutalized them this episode, and they deserve it. Make no mistake. But when they want something to be good, it's good. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I have no doubt that that's going to run at a rock-solid 30 FPS, despite having even more crazy shit in it than Breath of the Wild did. Same with Metroid Prime 4. If we see it come out for this Switch hardware, which, you know what, I'm in agreement with you, I kind of doubt, because we've heard so little about it, they might just be waiting. But if they surprise us and they say, hey, this is coming out, I expect that it will run flawlessly. They don't take risks on their big IPs. In terms of performance and hardware, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to make sure that shit runs nice.
Yeah, I think that they have to. I mean, Metroid Prime has been on ice for so long and sent back to the bakery for so long that if they come out with it and it sucks, it's going to kill Metroid, unfortunately.
Yeah. I
so
mean,
what else are you really excited for here on the games list?
Yeah, so what Atomic Heart, Tears of the Kingdom, Lightfall were my ones that have confirmed release dates. There's a couple I'm so fucking jazzed about that, as of the time that we made this, didn't have release dates. Those consist of, for me, and maybe we can talk about Diablo, because I wish Diablo was here, but it's not because of what they did to Immortals. But the big ones are Final Fantasy 16. That looks sick to me. And Nightingale.
I'm super stoked about Nightingale after you showed me all that stuff the other day.
Yeah. I think Final Fantasy is a quick one. I loved 15. It wasn't a great game in terms of the gameplay, but the story was really great, and the ambition was there. And it just felt charming because of how goofy it was and because of how ballsy they were with the story, man. It was unabashedly Japanese. That's the best thing I can say about it. It felt like an anime that you'd watch and be like, you know what? Regardless of the fact of how weird and goofy that was, I loved it. So I'm excited for Final Fantasy 16 for that reason. And, I look forward to it. It's been years since we played a new mainline Final Fantasy game, so bring it on.
Yeah. And in the same, breath, I'm double, triple stoked for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I spoke last year about how Final Fantasy VII Remake really, really surprised me and how much I enjoyed that game. And I've been on pins and needles waiting for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Hell yeah,
so
man.
maybe 2023 is the year of Final Fantasy.
Very well
I hope
could
it
be.
is. I've been really hesitant. Final Fantasy 15, it did not appeal to me, so I never played it. Final Fantasy 13, I actually really enjoyed against a lot of the popular census, I think. But Final Fantasy 12, I didn't enjoy. And Final Fantasy 11 and 14, I didn't play because they're MMOs. But Final Fantasy, it seems like every other single-player version might be my steez. So, hey, let's see how it comes out. I'm open to it.
Yeah, well, you know what? Final Fantasy 16, just to bring it home, I played Final Fantasy 14 as a resident Destiny man. I spent a lot of time in that MMO, and it is the only MMO, and I'm talking about true MMOs here, so Destiny's not in the conversation. I'm talking your WoWs, your Guild Wars. Final Fantasy 14 was the only one that I played and dumped a gross amount of time into.
Wow. High praise.
Yeah, and I really loved it. And it's very exciting that the guy who's making Final Fantasy 16 is the same man who is in charge of Final Fantasy 14. So imagine everything he did right with the story of 14 and the, this is a whole conversation you could have, but the community respect of 14 and the gameplay of 14, and put that all in a single-player experience that looks to be incredibly grand and incredibly epic. And yeah, you've got reason to be excited even if you're not into 14. This is a guy who respects his players, and I am so excited to see what he can do when given this single-player template.
Well, I'm wishing for their success. I might not be the biggest Final Fantasy fan in the world, but I never want to see bad games come out. So I really hope it ends up being as good as your expectations are holding it.
Amen. Well said.
Before we wrap things up, there's one last thing to discuss that's coming out in 2023. And all I can say is, let's go.
Wahoo.
I'm so lukewarm on the Super Mario Bros. Movie. It honestly looks like it's a lot of fun, but Chris Pratt could not be farther from what I wanted in the voice. They could have done Charles Martinet and just not been as fruity, yahoo! And it would have been probably perfect. But, they chose maybe the most boring actor in mainstream Hollywood right now. And that breaking my heart, man.
Listen. Super Mario is the... You know what? I don't know why this became the Roast Nintendo hour, but the Roast Nintendo 2 hours, but we're here for it, and I'm going to finish it off with this shit. Super Mario Brothers, the movie, is the perfect distillation of Nintendo and all its problems. You have a you have a movie that looks incredible. It pays respect to fans of the originals. It has a beautiful soundtrack, beautiful character design. The story looks really good. And then, when you're right at the finish line, you're gonna drop some bullshit like Chris fucking Pratt as Super Mario. Wahoo! Let's go.
Everything he said was just so, unenthusiastic.
There's no life.
Did you see that interview he did?
Yeah, well, you mean the
my
quintessential one where he's
God.
like, yeah, I spent so many hours stomping Koopas.
Yup. I've
Yeah.
always wanted to be Mario. Fuck off. No, you haven't.
I don't understand it, frankly, and that's why I say it's the perfect example of Nintendo, this perfect definition of Nintendo. They had a home run lined up. Given what we now have seen from the movie and heard from the movie, they had a fucking slam dunk. And they fucking botch it by having Christopher Pratt play Super Mario, their flagship guy, their Sonic the Hedgehog, their Kratos. This is the dude. And they had Chris Pratt play this guy. I gotta be honest, man. If Miyamoto was responsible for this, holy hell. I don't know what I could possibly say to that guy, except maybe it's time to take a back seat with these decisions.
I don't think it was Miyamoto's. I don't think he had that kind of input. I'm sure it came from producers at Illumination, the American studio that's producing it. I want to give Miyamoto-san the benefit of the doubt. But hey, you know what? If he came in and he was like, I want to make a Super Mario Bros. Movie, and the only way I'm going to do it is if you hire Chris Pratt to play Mario, then Miyamoto has let me down.
I have no way of knowing. Yeah, I'm not assuming that he was the problem, but all I know is that he very enthusiastically introduced this cast. So,
hey, props to Nintendo and Illumination for pretty much every other casting choice. Charlie Day as Luigi and Jack Black as Bowser. I'm way fucking here for that, honestly. I'm super here for it.
Jack Black is incredible from what we've seen so far. That was a incredible casting, and I will eat my own shorts for having doubted that. Anya Taylor-Joy, fine. I don't think, it's whatever. I wasn't going to the theater to see Peach's voice actor. I'm sorry, that wasn't like super important to me. But Mario, though, like, oh, do you think someone at like Illumination was like, oh man, you know what movie I just saw who would be great for Mario? Passengers with Chris Pratt.
Jurassic World. That's our Mario.
Oh man, you know who'd be great in this? Peter Quill from the Avengers.
I think what they saw the fucking box office for all of these Chris Pratt movies.
If we're going to be realistic and we're going to be cynical about it, he's going to get asses in seats. And it's just such a bummer, though, because everything else about the movie seems like such a labor of love. And if we get past the jokes, that's what seems so disappointing about it, is that everything about it seems like a labor of love. The music, when you watch these trailers, is like a beautiful medley of music from the games, and it brings you right back to when you were playing those games as a kid. There's homages everywhere you look. The visuals are gorgeous. So it's just so astounding to me that they would fuck it up so badly by having the most baffling cast I've ever seen. And regardless of the fact that some of them have made me say, okay, all right, okay, I didn't realize you had game like that, it is still a baffling cast. Dude, nobody's going to look at Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong and say, oh, yeah, that's exactly who I'd expect to go, blow, blow.
Yeah, but I'm way interested in seeing how it all comes out.
You know what? You're right. And I think that's...
I'll be there day one, motherfucker.
Me too. And that's a great way to look at 2023. I have no fucking clue how it could top some of the insanity that happened this year in video games and life. But... God damn it, I'm still, for some reason, excited.
Yeah, 2022 might not have hit the mark on every shot, but we really had some high peaks. I mean, Elden Ring and Vampire Survivors are very worthy of their GOTY titles, respectively. And I think we were really treated to some special games this year. I'm very excited to see what 2023 has in store.
Absolutely.
And I'm even more excited to talk about it with you next year, pal.
For sure, man. And I completely agree. We had a lot of great games this last year, a lot of great game-adjacent media and adaptations that came out this year. This year's already starting off with a bang. We got The Last of Us like next week coming out on HBO. So we'll have a lot to talk about if this pace keeps up. It's been a pleasure talking with you as always, and everyone play Outer Wilds.
Everybody go play Outer Wilds. We'll let you go. I want to thank you for sticking with us. It's about 2.5 hours recording time on our end. We'll see what I can narrow it down to. But 2023 has game and went. Very much appreciate you listening. I'd love to get your feedback if you do, even if it's just to say, hey, I listened to the episode, because I have no way of knowing who's actually listening to this. So feel free to tweet. I think it's at @TheFalcane. @Game and Went is the Twitter for the show. And as always, don't forget to save.
Alrighty.
Oh, grip it and rip it.
Hell yeah, Brother Bear. Keep that in the credits. Keep that as like a fucking Marvel post-credits scene.
Oh, gotta grip it and rip it.